We open on the life of Mamiya Yuto, a salaryman in the sales department. He's out on his rounds, already wilting under the oppressive summer heat. Forced to wear a full suit, he silently curses his company's strict dress code. He trudges down the sidewalk, regretting every step of his commute. His job is a soul-crushing grind at an exploitative company he feels trapped in. It's an endless cycle of overwork, crowded trains, and barely enough pay to survive. But he finds a small moment of solace in front of a local bookstore. His one and only recent source of entertainment is a light novel series. It's a fantasy story where an ordinary guy gets transported to another world with cheat abilities. And deep down, Mamiya wishes for that exact same kind of escape from his reality. He lets out a heavy sigh, already dreading the work that awaits him. But from the shadows, a voice declares that it has finally found him. Mamiya's eyes widen in terror as he spots something impossible. A small, cloaked figure sits on the ground, seemingly waiting for him. His mind races, trying to make sense of what he thinks is a ghost. But before he can even scream, his body begins to turn to dust, and he finds himself falling into an endless, dark abyss. A mysterious voice echoes from the void, offering a simple greeting. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light overwhelms his senses. He stumbles back as the voice apologizes for the sudden transition. The voice belongs to a small, ethereal being with a serene smile, who calmly announces that Mamiya is being sent to another world. His mind races, connecting the dots. This must be the isekai transfer he's always wished for. He tries to dismiss it as a dream, but the being confirms it personally summoned him here. It excitedly describes a world of fantasy, filled with magic, knights, and dragons. The one question on Mamiya's mind is whether he'll get the cheat abilities from his novels. But a new, condescending voice suddenly echoes through the void. A smug-looking man appears, mocking the very idea of Mamiya receiving any powers. The crushing reality of his situation leaves Mamiya utterly speechless. He immediately tries to back out, knowing an ordinary person wouldn't survive. The smug man holds Mamiya effortlessly, explaining that his miserable life is what made him the perfect candidate. Mamiya stammers, unable to deny the crushing truth in the man's words. He remembers how fantasy was once a simple escape, a world he explored in his youth. But that was just a hobby, not a reason to be thrown into a world where he's guaranteed to die. The man's condescending smile reminds him of his own boss's empty promises. And just like at his job, if he's being forced into this, he's going to find a way to game the system. He looks the man dead in the eye, demanding to know if he was chosen specifically for this. He lays it all out. He has no magic, no skills, and a body worn down by years of overwork. He screams that sending him like this is a guaranteed death sentence, a complete waste of a summoned hero. The ethereal being seems unbothered, but Mamiya's outburst has apparently given it an idea. A spark of determination flashes in Mamiya's eyes. He desperately tries to negotiate for any advantage, even asking to be de-aged to a child. The being offers a single, special concession, the ability to see his own status screen. Mamiya explodes, screaming that this is nowhere near the cheat power he needs to survive. But the ethereal being has lost its patience, and forcefully sends him on his way. He plummets into the portal, realizing he hasn't gained a single ounce of strength. As he vanishes, the being reflects on a once blessed existence from a forgotten past. A sinister smile spreads across its face, wondering if Mamiya will awaken his potential, or simply break. Mamiya lands with a thud, cursing the acorn-headed god under his breath. He finds himself alone, dropped unceremoniously in the middle of a dense forest. He immediately scrambles for cover behind a large rock. His mind screams that he's an RPG player, not a survival expert. But he quickly realizes this is no time for complaining. A sudden thought stops him cold. He stares down at his own hand, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. He remembers his desperate plea to be turned back into a child. A part of him wonders if he got too greedy with his demands. After all that fighting, all he got was a status screen and a younger body. His negotiation skills are as useless here as they were in his old life. He tries to shake off the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. He reminds himself that it's far too early to give up. Before night falls, he needs to secure shelter, water, and food. His first priority is to take stock of his belongings. He lays out the mundane contents of his salaryman briefcase. His leather dress shoes are completely impractical for this terrain, and his suit is hardly appropriate for survival. But with his stomach growling, his frustration finally boils over. Still, something else has been nagging at the back of his mind. He notices a small white circle hovering in the corner of his vision. He squints, wondering if this is the gift he was promised. He lets out a startled yelp as he tries to interact with the floating icon. Suddenly, a massive screen materializes directly in front of his face. His eyes widen in disbelief as he stares at the impossible sight. The status window is so large it completely blocks his view of the forest. He stumbles back, overwhelmed by the sudden interface. A memory of the ethereal being surfaces, mocking how inconvenient the screen is. It displays his name, Mamiya Yuto, and his depressingly average stats. He scrolls down, a glimmer of hope appearing as he finds the skills section. Before him is a staggering list of over 100 different skills he can learn. The interface is laid out like a game, with clear paths for unlocking advanced abilities. But his excitement fades when he sees the number at the top. 0 skill points. He decides to methodically document his initial stats just like in a game. But a sudden rustling in the nearby bushes shatters his concentration. He whips around in a panic, his heart pounding in his chest. A ferocious, horned rabbit bursts from the undergrowth, its eyes glowing with malice. He realizes he was so absorbed by the status screen that he let his guard down completely. It looks like a low-level monster, but Mamiya knows he's in no shape for a fight. His first instinct is to observe his enemy, trying to predict its next move. He imagines its massive horn piercing his chest, the shock alone being enough to kill him. With no way to treat such a wound, he knows a direct confrontation is suicide. He needs a better plan. He quickly deduces that the horn is its primary weapon, which means its main form of attack is a simple charge. With a plan forming in his mind, he quickly removes his suit jacket, preparing to use it as a makeshift tool. The rabbit's eyes lock onto its target, and it lunges forward with surprising speed. Mamiya throws the jacket and dives out of the way, successfully blinding the creature and evading its deadly horn. The beast stumbles, completely disoriented by the sudden darkness. Having correctly predicted its attack, Mamiya prepares for his next move. With no other weapon available, he grabs the tie from his shirt collar. He grits his teeth, bidding a silent farewell to his expensive custom suit. He leaps onto the beast's back, wrapping the tie tightly around its neck. Mamiya wrestles the thrashing creature, using all his weight to pin it down. The rabbit struggles violently, but he desperately holds on. With a final, determined pull, he delivers the finishing blow. He screams that the durability of his expensive tie is not to be underestimated. He collapses to the ground beside the fallen monster, wondering if it's finally over. His heart pounds in his chest as he gasps for air, the adrenaline slowly fading. And under the forest canopy, Mamiya lets out a roar of victory, having survived his first trial. But the euphoria of his first victory quickly fades as he realizes he needs to find a safe place to rest. He spots a massive tree, wondering if he can climb it to get a better view and escape ground-level threats. With no other tools, he improvises, using his belt as a makeshift grappling hook. He begins the arduous climb up the trunk, pushing his de-aged body to its absolute limit. He finally pulls himself onto a high branch, and from his new vantage point, he scans the horizon. But all he can see is an endless sea of trees. There's no sign of civilization, no end to the forest in sight. A familiar, mocking presence appears, revealing it was trying to kill him from the very beginning. But even as exhaustion sets in, a new thought begins to form. He realizes that if he can track the sun's position, he can at least figure out his direction. His eyes lock onto a break in the canopy, hoping it's a river, and beyond the distant mountain range, there might finally be a human settlement. The overwhelming despair begins to fade, replaced by a sliver of hope for the future. With a newfound determination, he declares that he will conquer this forest. He lets out a manic laugh, sarcastically cheering for his happy isekai life. But his outburst causes him to lose his balance, sending him tumbling from the branch. He hits the ground with a painful thud, already missing the comfort of his bed. His first priority is to find that river, and he wonders if this horned rabbit is even edible. With his resolve hardened, Mamiya prepares for his next move. He checks his watch, realizing he can use it to track the time and the sun's position. He'd completely forgotten his watch is a high-tech, solar-powered model with a built-in compass. Using his newfound sense of direction, he begins scaling a nearby cliff face. But he's quickly startled by a strange, multi-eyed bird native to this world. His initial fear gives way to curiosity as he notices what the bird is doing. It's pecking at a cluster of unfamiliar fruit, suggesting they might be safe to eat. He cautiously plucks one from the branch, knowing that if it's poisonous, his journey ends here. With no other choice, he takes a hesitant bite, bracing for the worst. But his face immediately lights up with joy as the sweet taste floods his senses. With his immediate survival secured, he frantically gathers as much fruit as he can. He takes a moment to savor his small victory, feeling like he's finally making progress. Out of habit, he decides to check his status screen for any changes. But a strange new progress bar suddenly appears labeled Gathering. He looks down at the fruit in his hand, a theory beginning to form in his mind. He realizes that specific actions like fighting or foraging grant experience in related skills. The world suddenly feels like a real-life RPG, and Mamiya couldn't be more thrilled. A confident smile spreads across his face. If he can just keep this up, he might actually survive. But his moment of self-assurance is cut short by a sound from the nearby bushes. Peeking through the leaves, his eyes widen at an unbelievable sight. He always suspected there would be other, more intelligent beings in this forest. But unlike the horned rabbit, this humanoid creature is a threat he can't afford to underestimate. It's a goblin, a classic monster straight out of his fantasy novels. And in an instant, its predatory gaze locks directly onto him. The creature lets out a ferocious roar, baring its jagged teeth. Mamiya's blood runs cold, his brief moment of hope completely shattered. The goblin lunges forward, its eyes filled with nothing but malice. He barely manages to throw himself out of the path of its attack, scrambling on the ground while gripping the only weapon he has left. With a desperate thrust, his pen finds its mark directly in the creature's eye. The goblin stumbles back, howling in agony from the unexpected blow. But Mamiya quickly realizes he was far too naive in his approach. He thought a goblin would be a low-level threat, but it's still fighting back with vicious intent. This isn't some game NPC, it's a living creature fighting desperately for its own life. Its claws dig deep into his shoulder, a searing reminder of the stakes. He knows he has to abandon all hesitation and finish this for good. With a surge of adrenaline, he overpowers the creature, pinning it to the ground. He brings his makeshift weapon down again and again, determined to end the fight. Finally, the creature's struggles cease as its hand falls limp in the grass. Mamiya gasps for breath, accepting the brutal reality of what survival will cost him. He reflects on his carelessness, knowing the fight could have gone much smoother. His immediate concern is the deep gash on his shoulder, which needs tending to. It's a harsh reminder that this isn't a game. He has to stay vigilant. As he turns to leave, he notices something left behind where the goblin fell. His eyes widen in shock at what he sees. Lying on the ground is the severed arm of another human, still clad in armor. The grim discovery sends a chill down his spine, a testament to this world's brutality. But then, a sudden realization hits him like a bolt of lightning. He looks down at his own wound. As a searing pain suddenly shoots through his body, his eyes snap open, filled with a primal fear. He scrambles backward, wondering what new horror has found him. But from the ground emerges a small, mole-like creature, letting out a strange cry. Mamiya's tension immediately breaks, finding the little animal almost cute. He questions how something so harmless could have possibly been the source of the attack. But his doubt vanishes as the creature unleashes a powerful blast of what looks like magic. Unsure of its range or power, Mamiya's only option is to defend himself. The swirling projectile hurtles directly toward him. It slams into his briefcase with a deafening impact. The force knocks him back, revealing a large rock he'd placed inside for protection. He realizes that even through the briefcase, the force was immense. A direct hit would be fatal. His makeshift shield is already smoking, and he knows he can't dodge the next one. With no other choice, Mamiya charges forward, deciding to close the distance. The mole-like creature lets out another strange cry, seemingly unfazed. But as Mamiya gets closer, it tilts its head in confusion. He hurls the heavy rock he'd been using for defense with all his might. The projectile finds its mark, striking the small creature with devastating force. It falls limp to the ground, its attack silenced for good. Mamiya gasps for air, learning a valuable lesson. Crush ranged threats before they can act. And just then, a system notification appears, announcing that he has finally reached level 2. Mamiya slumps against a tree, realizing that reaching level 2 was a brutal ordeal. He knows he can't rest properly out in the open, with danger lurking everywhere. The back-to-back fights against the goblin and the mole have pushed him to his absolute limit. A sharp pain from his shoulder wound reminds him of his immediate need for clean water. He's filthy, dehydrated, and feels like he's about to collapse from exhaustion. But then he hears a faint, rhythmic dripping in the distance. He freezes, his head snapping up as he tries to place the sound. A desperate hope fills his eyes as he gasps for air. Through a break in the trees, a bright light reflects off a surface, confirming his suspicions. With a triumphant roar, Mamiya sprints toward the source, his survival instincts taking over completely. He tosses his briefcase aside and dives headfirst into the cool, clear water. He's found it, a small waterfall, a sanctuary in this endless forest. After days of filth and dehydration, he finally gets a life-saving drink. He quickly realizes this river is also a source of food, teeming with fish. And with the horned rabbit he killed earlier, he's secured a supply of meat. Mamiya takes a moment to appreciate his own resourcefulness, having set up a makeshift fish trap, With his first catch in hand, he decides it's time to test something out. He's going to see if he can finally use the fire magic he saw on his status screen. But first, he finds the perfect shelter for the night. A small cave hidden behind the waterfall. Exhausted but safe, Mamiya finally allows himself a moment of rest. He pulls up his status screen, desperately hoping his level up was enough. With the 2 points he earned, he decides to invest in his first skill, fire magic. A wide grin spreads across his face as he allocates the final point needed. A system notification confirms he has successfully acquired level 1 fire magic. Mamiya pumps his fists in the air, celebrating his first real power-up. But his excitement quickly turns to confusion as he reads the skill's description. He'd imagined launching massive fireballs, but the text is frustratingly vague. Deciding there's only one way to find out, he prepares to test his new ability. He focuses his will, pointing his finger toward the waterfall. With a confident shout, Mamiya attempts to cast his very first spell. He ponders the exact mechanics of casting a spell. He shouts the name of the spell, expecting a grand result. But absolutely nothing happens, leaving him to wonder if he used the wrong hand gesture. He tries again with more force, pushing his hand forward. Yet the forest remains silent, and his spell completely fails to materialize. He puts on a brave face as if that was exactly what he intended. But his frustration boils over. He spent his only 2 skill points on this. He forces himself to calm down and think logically. He remembers the mole creature conjuring a dark mist before its attack. He realizes that without a skill for shortened incantations, he must be missing the most crucial step, the actual chant. He realizes he has to actually speak the words, to say the incantation out loud. He clears his throat, feeling a little foolish as he prepares to follow the rules of this new world. With a dramatic flourish, he calls upon the spirits of fire, asking them to lend him their power. But the world remains still, his plea completely unanswered. He lets out a self-deprecating laugh, wondering if maybe he just used the wrong word. So he tries again with renewed vigor, this time calling for a fire orb. And once again, his efforts are met with absolute, infuriating failure. He tries every combination he can think of, from desperate pleas to dramatic dances. His energy and hope completely drain away. Mamiya retreats to a tree branch, deciding to forget fire magic ever existed. He realizes he probably needs to know this world's language for the incantation, a language he has no way of learning. Utterly defeated, he decides to just give up for the night and get some sleep. But a new day dawns, bringing with it the chirping of birds and a fresh start. Mamiya walks along the river, his stomach growling as he dreams of a properly cooked meal. His thoughts are interrupted when he spots another figure by a campfire in the distance. But as he gets closer, he realizes it's another goblin armed with a crude club. This time, however, Mamiya is prepared, pulling out a small fire starter from his belongings. He creates a bright flash of light, momentarily blinding the creature. And in that split second, he closes the distance and lands a solid punch to its jaw. The goblin goes flying, and Mamiya realizes he's actually getting used to this. He decides to put his fire magic troubles aside for now, focusing on the more immediate problem of food. But just then, a system notification announces he's reached level 3 and has even acquired a brand new skill called lunge. He stares in utter confusion, wondering where that came from. He quickly pulls up his status screen, frantically searching for the new ability. He finally finds it under the other category, a skill simply called lunge. Its description reveals it's a short-range dash, and Mamiya's face lights up with pure joy. Without a moment's hesitation, he prepares to test it out, calling out the skill's name. But just like with his fire magic, absolutely nothing happens. A familiar sense of failure washes over him, a painful reminder of his magic attempt. He wonders if maybe he needs to be in motion for it to work, taking a single step forward. He tries again, this time calling out the skill's name while lunging forward, and in a burst of speed, he's suddenly several feet away, his eyes wide with childlike wonder. He realizes he doesn't need to shout the name, just the intent and the motion are enough to activate it. While not a combat skill, he figures it could be perfect for a surprise attack or a quick escape. The only downside he can think of is that his dress shoes might fly off in the process. Having secured a safe place to rest, he declares that tonight's bed is the best he's ever had. The soft, mossy ground is so comfortable that he decides this cave will be his new base of operations. Before he sleeps, he pulls out his notebook to properly document his status changes. He's now level 3, with noticeable increases to his intelligence and agility. He quickly calculates that if the max level is 99, his stats could eventually reach a respectable level. He imagines a future where he's a max-level, muscle-bound hero. But for now, he focuses on the data, theorizing that skills might offer bonus stats that will affect his growth. Still, the fire magic remains a mystery, and he can't figure out how he suddenly learned lunge. A memory of the horned rabbit sparks a new theory. Perhaps it was a bonus for defeating a specific enemy. He reviews his recent actions, from gathering fruit to fighting monsters, and realizes each one contributed to a specific skill's progress. It all starts to click. If his theory is correct, then hunting monsters must be the most efficient way to gain experience. He deduces that the people of this world must naturally acquire skills suited to their everyday lives, just like in an RPG. A faint smile crosses his face as he's reminded of the old video games he used to love. He remembers how those games were filled with players who all found their own way to enjoy the world. But among them, Mamiya only ever pursued one thing: absolute, overwhelming strength. He remembers his glory days as the #1 player on the server, a being so powerful they called him the Demon God. It was a meaningless existence after being kicked out of college, but it was also the most fun he'd ever had. And as he looks at his notes, he realizes this new world is absolutely perfect for him. The memories of that hellish grind come flooding back, the endless pursuit of levels, stats, and skills. He snaps himself back to reality, reminding himself that he's an adult now. He can't just repeat the same obsessive patterns. But for tonight, at least, he can finally rest easy and dream of what's to come. The next day, however, his peace is interrupted by a familiar rustling in the grass. Another mole-like creature bursts from the ground, ready for a fight. But this time, Mamiya makes short work of the monster, striking a triumphant pose over his fallen foe. He stomps down with a triumphant shout, crushing a second mole creature with ease. His strategy pays off, and a system notification confirms he's already reached level 5. He's perfected a simple but effective tactic: lure them out, stun them with a rock, and go in for the kill. He realizes that hunting these moles is the most efficient way to grind experience, far easier than dealing with goblins. He even starts to wonder if some goblins, like the ones carrying clubs, are a rarer, more dangerous variant. But his strategic planning is cut short by a sudden noise from above. He cautiously peeks around the tree, wondering if it's another goblin or some new kind of monster. But his eyes widen in shock when he realizes it's not a monster at all. It's a human. He hears the panicked voice of a child and immediately breaks into a sprint. With a desperate look in his eyes, he prays that he can make it in time. He realizes the mole creature is just a distraction, its attention focused elsewhere. It hasn't even noticed him, completely preoccupied with the commotion ahead. With a furious kick, Mamiya dispatches the pest, knowing it's just a symptom of a larger problem. A horrifying thought crosses his mind. If these moles are out, it means there must be a much larger threat nearby. He spots them in the distance, a group of children running for their lives. 3 of them in total, with one boy desperately trying to fend off a pack of goblins. But these aren't ordinary monsters. One of them is even wielding a proper sword. The memory of that severed armored arm flashes through his mind. With his resolve steeled, Mamiya sprints into action, determined not to let anyone else die on his watch. He rushes to the boy's side, shouting that he'll take on 2 of the goblins. The young swordsman can only stare back, completely stunned by this stranger's arrival. He shouts in disbelief, questioning Mamiya's sudden declaration. But Mamiya simply tells him to trust his judgment as the goblins close in. A flicker of resolve appears in the boy's eyes. And just like that, an unlikely duo stands ready to face the horde. Mamiya steels himself, confident he can handle a 1-on-2 fight. Knowing the first strike is crucial, they both lunge forward to seize the advantage. A goblin swings its stolen blade with vicious intent, but his own attack goes wide, forcing him into a desperate dodge. He counters with a brutal strike of his own, telling the creature to stay down for good. With one goblin out of the way, he immediately pivots to face the second. He's already gotten used to this pattern, using his fire starter to create an opening. He tosses the creature aside, his eyes now locked on the one with the sword. But the armored goblin is a different class of threat, landing a heavy blow to his shoulder. The force of the impact sends Mamiya stumbling backward, his makeshift tactics failing him. He grits his teeth, the pain a sharp reminder of his own fragility. He knows he can't take another hit like that, but he refuses to back down. The goblin lets out a roar, preparing to deliver the final decisive strike. But just then, the young swordsman steps forward, ready to rejoin the fight. Mamiya calls out to the boy, checking to see if he managed to take down his opponent. He quickly assesses the battlefield, noticing the armored goblin is still unaware of the boy's position. The young swordsman sees his opening and closes the distance, his eyes filled with a fierce, unwavering determination. But Mamiya screams a desperate warning, realizing the goblin's true intent. The creature catches the blade with its bare hand, a twisted grin on its face. Its claws dig into the boy's arm, the sheer difference in strength becoming terrifyingly clear. But Mamiya refuses to let the fight end here, rushing in from the side. He lands the final decisive blow, a system notification confirming he's reached level 6. With the threat finally gone, the children can only express their overwhelming relief. But as he tries to speak, he realizes they can't understand a word he's saying. The children can only stare back in confusion, the young swordsman holding up a hand. Mamiya tries again, asking them to wait and see if they can understand him at all. But his words are met with nothing but blank, uncomprehending stares. He realizes he'll have to spend his precious skill points on language comprehension. But his frustration grows when he sees level 1 only gives him the vocabulary of a 5-year-old. The children watch on, completely bewildered by his sudden mood swings. He tells himself to calm down, knowing he just needs one more level for a proper conversation. He immediately invests his remaining points, screaming in triumph as he reaches level 2. His sudden, manic outburst leaves the children completely terrified. He offers a frantic apology for startling them, explaining he had no other choice. The children can only stare, baffled by his decision to dump all his points into a single skill. He turns to the girl, finally able to ask if they can understand him now. The young swordsman confirms they can, but adds they've never heard of gaining language skills through prayer. The word goddess triggers a memory of the ethereal being who sent him to this world. Pushing the thought aside, Mamiya asks the children if they live somewhere in the area. They explain they were hunting a horned rabbit for a nearby town when they were ambushed by goblins. Their story quickly devolves into an argument over who's to blame for getting them lost. The girl retorts that she was counting on the young swordsman to protect them all. But he fires back that anyone in their right mind would run from a goblin wielding a proper sword. Mamiya can't help but smile, finding the noisy argument almost comforting. After so much time spent in solitude, he's just glad to be around other people. He remembers how he once naively believed this world was just like a game, but the reality was a terrifying struggle, where every wrong move meant certain death. And now, for the first time since arriving, he's finally able to talk with someone. The girl's voice cuts through his thoughts, her expression filled with concern. He can barely get a word out, tears of relief streaming down his face. He quickly tries to play it off, explaining he was just so relieved to finally meet another person. The young swordsman asks if they can make it back to their town by nightfall. But one look at their exhausted friend tells them that getting out of the forest won't be that simple. Mamiya notices the heavy basket on the other boy's back, a clear sign of his exhaustion. He tells them they need to leave before nightfall, offering up one of his own tools to light the way. The children's eyes light up with wonder at the sight of his modern flashlight. They immediately assume it's a magic tool, concluding from his strange clothes that he must be a noble. Mamiya frantically denies their assumptions, insisting he's just a regular person. The young swordsman points out a river, saying he knows the way, and Mamiya agrees to let him take the lead. With their path decided, they take their first steps toward civilization. The small group begins their trek through the dense, unfamiliar woods. Along the way, the young swordsman spots a horned rabbit and immediately gives chase. With a swift and practiced strike, he takes down the creature, securing them a meal for the road. The young swordsman carefully cleans his blade after the kill. He then turns to Mamiya, asking if he can borrow the goblin's sword. He explains they don't have time to harvest monster parts, so he might as well test out his new weapon. Mamiya is completely lost, unfamiliar with terms like magic stones or subjugation parts. He asks if those are things that can be collected and sold, a question the boy finds obvious. The children explain that for them, it's a vital source of income, even if the materials from this forest aren't worth much. They once again assume he's a noble, wondering how he could be so ignorant about such a basic part of their world. He frantically denies it, insisting he's nothing more than a low-class corporate drone. The girl mishears his explanation, excitedly asking if a corporate drone is some kind of amazing creature he keeps as a pet. Mamiya can only sigh before asking if the three of them are an official party. The girl cheerfully explains their roles. Jink hunts, she gathers, and Pata carries the supplies. Mamiya asks if they aren't afraid of the forest, but she says they sell herbs and fruit for a living, even if it is scary. She explains her family are pharmacists, but medicine is expensive, so she has to work hard to earn money. Mamiya can't help but be impressed by the young girl's maturity. He then looks around, realizing someone is missing from their group. It's Pata, the third boy who is struggling to keep up under the weight of his pack. Mamiya calls back, telling the boy to take his time and not push himself too hard. But Pata only looks back with a confused, exhausted expression. He finally catches up to the group, apologizing for being so slow. Mamiya turns to the girl, realizing with a jolt that Pada can't understand a word he's saying. Pada explains he was told to pray for the language comprehension skill from the goddess. He's still torn between that and a farming skill, a dilemma Mamiya finds amusing. He realizes their prayer to the goddess is just like his own skill point system. But their conversation is cut short as Jink senses a threat not in the trees, but underground. He explains the mole creatures are sensitive to sound, tapping his knife to lure one out. And just as predicted, one of the familiar mole creatures bursts from the ground. Mamiya is impressed as Jink proudly explains his hunter father taught him everything. He asks if Jink plans to be an adventurer, but the boy casually dismisses the idea. He explains there are far stronger monsters ahead, so he's in no hurry to move on. But Mamiya can't help but feel a growing concern for Pada and the girl. Jink explains that with his father gone, he has to get strong quickly to support his mother. Mamiya is taken aback by the young boy's heavy burden. He realizes all three children are fighting their own desperate battles just to survive. It dawns on him that for kids his apparent age, this brutal reality is completely normal. He wonders if they still see him as a noble despite his constant denials. Jink breaks the tension with a smile, realizing they haven't even exchanged names yet. Mamiya knows he can't use his real name, which would sound completely foreign in this world. So on the spur of the moment, he blurts out the first thing that comes to mind. He introduces himself with a new name, Loki. But even he has to admit the name feels a little awkward coming out of his mouth. The children's eyes widen in disbelief, recognizing the name as that of the legendary Demon King. A memory surfaces of his past self, a time when that name meant something entirely different. Loki can only react with confusion, having no idea why they're so stunned. He remembers the game world where he made that name legendary, becoming the server's strongest player. It was the name of his in-game avatar, a fearsome player known simply as the Demon King. He never intended to reveal his status screen to anyone, a gift from the very being who trapped him here, and he certainly never thought he'd need a fake name to get by. But he recalls the thrill of battle, the excitement of seeing his status increase with every victory. He remembers his obsession with landing the final blow, a habit from his gaming days. He had once dreamed of becoming a max-level master, a title he felt he truly deserved. He remembers the edgy persona he crafted for himself, a name he now finds deeply embarrassing. But he can only wonder how that name led to this bizarre misunderstanding. The children excitedly point out that his all-black attire matches the legendary Demon King from their stories. A chilling thought crosses his mind. What if the characters from that legend are still alive? He wonders if the acorn-headed god summoned him specifically to play the part of this world's villain. But he quickly dismisses the idea as too far-fetched, even as the children continue to chatter. Trying to sound casual, Loki asks them to tell him more about this story. Jink is stunned that someone dressed like him wouldn't know the legend of the Demon King's subjugation. It's a tale of a fearsome Demon King who emerged from the darkness to command an army of monsters, and of a legendary hero who descended from the light to save the world from his tyranny. Jink proudly calls it the epic tale of the hero Takuya, a story everyone knows. Loki internally scoffs, dismissing it as just another generic story about a hero and a demon king. But the name Takuya hits him like a lightning bolt, a sudden, shocking realization. The children explain that this hero was a prince from a distant kingdom. The girl excitedly adds that he was summoned from another world, possessing incredible cheat-like powers. The truth infuriates Loki. The acorn-headed god gave someone else the powers he was denied. He wonders if there have been others summoned here, a possibility Jink's stories seem to confirm. The girl dreams of meeting someone from another world, completely oblivious to the fact that one is standing right beside her. But Jink quickly shuts her down, reminding her they could never afford a trip to the capital. Their argument is cut short as Jink spots another mole creature bursting from the ground ahead. Jink tells Loki he'll take the one on the right, while Loki agrees to handle the other. The two of them move in perfect sync, dispatching the creatures with practiced ease. And for the first time, Loki feels a genuine sense of camaraderie. It reminds him of his old gaming days, when a well-coordinated party could take on any challenge. But back then, he was always the solo player, obsessed with efficiency above all else. He looks over at the children, the first real companions he's had in this world. And for the first time, he wonders what his future here might actually look like. With the immediate threats behind them, the group makes a final dash out of the forest. Jink proudly announces they've finally reached a safe area, much to everyone's relief. The girl offers to help Pada with his heavy load, a small act of kindness after their long journey. Loki can only stare in awe at the sight before them. In the distance, the lights of a town finally break through the twilight. The girl happily welcomes him to their home, the town of Bazat. but their arrival is met by an angry guard, demanding to know why they're so late. The children immediately sprint past him, much to Loki's surprise. The guard quickly catches them, scolding them for their recklessness. Loki watches the familiar scene with a tired but gentle smile. After hearing Jink's story, the guard turns to Loki with a look of gratitude. He thanks Loki for saving the children, but his attention quickly turns to the goblin's sword. Jink steps forward, presenting the blade as proof of their story. The guard inspects the blade, surprised by its excellent condition. He notes that it's a fine weapon, far better than what goblins usually carry. He officially welcomes Loki into Bazat, calling him the children's savior. Jink then offers the sword back to Loki, saying it belongs to him now. But Loki tells him to keep it, explaining that it's too big for him to use anyway. Jink argues that it's not a fair trade, insisting he can't wield it properly either. The guard cuts them off, telling them to settle it at the Hunters Guild tomorrow. He explains that the guildmaster must be notified about the armed goblin, a rare occurrence. With that settled, the children thank him one last time for everything he's done. Loki waves them off with a tired smile, agreeing to see them again the next day. The girl waves a final cheerful goodbye as the children disappear into the bustling town. As they leave, Loki pulls up his status screen, a new theory already forming in his mind. He realizes that the experience he gained was disproportionately high for the final blow he landed on the mole. It seems that if he truly wants to get stronger, he'll have to abandon his solo player mindset and find companions. But he was just starting to look forward to party play, and now he has to worry about kill stealing. The conflicting thoughts send his mind into a frantic spiral. But he quickly shakes it off, deciding to focus on exploring the town he fought so hard to reach. A genuine smile spreads across his face as he takes in the lively atmosphere of the market. His eyes immediately lock onto a stall selling sizzling skewers of meat. Without a second thought, he eagerly orders one, ready for his first real meal in this new world. But his joy is cut short by the vendor's answer, sending him into a fit of manic laughter. He stands frozen, the delicious smell of the food suddenly a cruel mockery. Because in his haste, he'd completely forgotten one crucial detail: he has no money. His only hope is to find the children, and desperately beg them for a loan. The next morning, he's woken from his sleep by the sound of a commotion below. A small crowd has gathered, pointing up at the criminal sleeping in the town's tree. Loki can only offer an awkward smile, the embarrassing memories of last night flooding back. Everything had been going so well right up until he parted ways with the children. But a mysterious vegetable called a beet had driven food prices so high that he was forced to spend the night outside. He can only dream of a world where money simply drops from defeated enemies. The girl's voice cuts through the morning air as she finally tracks him down. Jink immediately starts scolding him for causing such a scene. The girl explains they would have helped him if he'd just told them he had nowhere to stay. Loki can only look on, a bit embarrassed, as she asks where they're headed. She points them toward their destination, the Hunters Guild. She rushes ahead, telling him the others are already waiting inside. Loki steps through the doors, his eyes widening at the sheer scale of the place. Jink is already inspecting the request board, surprised by its construction. The guild hall is a massive, bustling hub of activity, just like in his games. And once again, the sight of delicious food reminds him of his empty stomach. The girl apologizes for their tardiness, finding the others already at a table. But Loki's eyes lock onto the food, his hunger completely taking over. He throws himself onto the table, desperately begging Pata for just a single bite. The first taste sends him into a state of pure, unadulterated bliss. The juicy meat and perfect seasoning are everything he's been craving. A gentle hand touches his cheek as a voice compliments his voracious appetite. He snaps back to reality, wondering who the voice belongs to. Before him stands an elegant woman with a knowing smile, who tells him he has a bright future. The children immediately recognize her, excitedly calling out the name Amanda. She then turns back to Loki, confirming his identity before summoning him to meet the guildmaster. Loki can only stare back in utter confusion. He tries to recall if he did anything to warrant this attention, but only remembers his lazy survival tactics. Amanda tells him he can eat later, gently guiding him up the stairs. She leads him to a large set of double doors, announcing their arrival. Loki cautiously steps inside, his apprehension growing. A stern-looking man introduces himself as Yargo, the master of the Bazat Hunters Guild. He extends a hand, offering a formal left-handed greeting. Loki accepts the handshake, introducing himself with his chosen name. Amanda serves them drinks as they sit down to discuss the recent events. But he can't help but wonder why she's decided to sit so close to him. Amanda gets straight to the point, telling Loki to accept this. His eyes light up at the sight of a pile of coins, his first real income. Yargo explains that this is a reward for saving the 3 children. He even offers a deep bow on behalf of the town's mayor, thanking him sincerely. Loki stammers that he was just fighting for his own life, but gratefully accepts the money. The guildmaster then extends an offer, saying someone with his skills should join the Hunters Guild. Amanda adds that joining a guild is a concern for anyone who plans to eventually leave town. Yargo elaborates, explaining the guild is an independent organization that operates across different countries. Loki takes a sip, realizing the guildmaster is a serious but genuinely good person. He offers a simple smile, understanding the weight of the offer completely. Yargo explains that he can tell a person's origin just by the way they move their mouth. Loki is intrigued by this peculiar method of deduction. The guildmaster then notes that Loki's speech pattern is unlike any language he's ever encountered. He reveals that 10 days ago, 2 local hunters went missing in that very same forest, and one of them had just acquired a brand new sword right before they disappeared. Yargo leans in, asking why a non-hunter like Loki was even in the forest to begin with. The sudden shift in tone sends a jolt of panic through Loki. He's clearly a suspect. He knows a clumsy lie will only make things worse, realizing he has to be honest. Loki admits he can't explain his purpose, but insists he wouldn't be here if he were guilty. But Yargo cuts straight to the point, asking if he happened to find anything out there. Loki explains that he did find a human arm, but it was already being consumed by a goblin. Yargo listens, concluding that the hunters are likely gone for good. Loki immediately offers to return the sword to the hunter's family, but the guildmaster tells him to keep it, explaining the man had no other relatives. Loki can only look up in stunned silence, completely caught off guard. Yargo apologizes for his suspicion, admitting the situation was complicated. With the interrogation over, he officially invites Loki to join the guild. He offers a warm smile, welcoming the boy to their ranks. Loki offers a quick bow before making his exit from the room. But the moment the door closes, he collapses against it, completely drained from the ordeal. Loki's mind races, the guildmaster's words hitting a little too close to home. That intense, probing gaze reminds him of someone from his past life, his old managing director, a man who always acted like a kind, grandfatherly figure to the younger staff, but whose eyes held a cold, calculating truth that he could never quite hide. Loki immediately regrets his earlier assessment. He's terrible at dealing with people like this. Meanwhile, Amanda notes that it's unusual for Yargo to be so fixated on a single child. She brings up a wild theory, asking if he remembers the strange items they recovered 6 years ago. Items of unknown origin, shoes, a glass plate, and a watch, all designated as top-secret national artifacts. And now, Loki has appeared with a similar watch, one that is still fully functional. Yargo concludes that Loki wasn't trying to hide anything, and his suspicion was merely a test of character. Yargo instructs Amanda to monitor Loki, but warns her not to dig too deep. She accepts the assignment with a confident, almost playful smile. The guildmaster is determined to uncover Loki's true purpose, especially given his unusual name. He looks out over the town, hoping Loki's presence will spark some much-needed development. Amanda offers a final word of advice as Loki heads back downstairs. He knows that joining the Hunters Guild is an essential step to surviving in this world. The guildmaster reflects on the lonely burden of leadership. Despite the harrowing interrogation, Loki feels more confident than ever that he can thrive here. The children immediately ask him how the meeting with the guildmaster went, and with a triumphant grin, he reveals the bag of coins he earned for his troubles. He proudly shows off his earnings, declaring that he's finally struck it rich. The children can only stare in awe, captivated by the sheer power of money. Loki learns the reward came directly from the town's mayor as a personal thank you. The girl points out that an official guild request would have paid even more, but Jink quickly silences her. Loki is taken aback by the mention of a potential punishment. Jink explains that this was a special case, and that normally rewards are handled very differently. But Loki can't shake the feeling that there was more to the guild master's words than he let on. He decides to push those worries aside for now, clapping his hands together. With money in his pocket, he declares it's time for a celebratory meal, much to the children's delight. But as the town bell rings, his thoughts turn to his next step. Officially registering as a hunter, Loki approaches the registration counter, where Amanda greets him with a playful smile. She formally introduces herself as the Bazat Guild's receptionist, adding that he's already her third favorite. Loki figures that getting on her good side now could pay off in the long run. Amanda gets straight to business, asking if he's ready to register and handing him the official paperwork. He hesitates for a moment, realizing that once he writes down his name, there's no turning back. Amanda casually asks if he even knows how to write. Loki insists he probably can, forcing the unfamiliar quill across the parchment. With the form filled out, she tells him it'll take a while to process his card and offers to explain how the guild works. Jink explains that the guild is primarily a place for taking on monster subjugation requests, but the girl adds that for lower-ranked members, there are plenty of odd jobs like gathering and assisting others. Loki asks about his starting rank, and Amanda explains that everyone begins at the very bottom. The system has 8 tiers, from G all the way up to S rank, with hunters restricted to quests at or below their level. The girl worries that without special permission, his options will be severely limited. Pata wonders about the conditions for a special promotion, but the girl says it's a secret. Loki then asks if there are any kind of promotion exams to rank up faster. Amanda confirms that practical tests begin at B rank, with S rank requiring an interview with the Grand Master. She explains that to get a special promotion, he'll have to prove his true strength to the guild. Loki smiles, realizing this world is a true meritocracy where hard work is actually rewarded. It's a stark contrast to his old life, where hard work was just a buzzword for exploitation. Just then, Amanda announces his guild card is ready, officially marking his new beginning. Loki proudly displays his new G-rank guild card as Amanda tells him she expects great things. With the formalities out of the way, she offers to answer any other questions he might have. She adds that the guildmaster personally asked her to look after him, a claim Yargo silently denies. Loki is just grateful for the offer of help, no matter the reason. He immediately asks for recommendations on the best places to hunt. Amanda explains that for low-rank hunters, the Palmyra Great Forest is unpopular. The mention of a first stratum reminds Loki of what Jink had told him earlier. The shallow areas are perfect for beginners, with weak monsters like goblins and horned rabbits, but the deeper parts of the forest are a complete mystery, piquing Loki's interest. Amanda explains that the forest is divided into strata, with monsters growing stronger the deeper one goes. Loki learns the forest is so vast it covers a quarter of the entire continent. The idea of a high-level dungeon right next to the starting town is a trope he absolutely loves. He then asks a crucial question. If he's not on an official request, is he even allowed to hunt? He clarifies, wondering if there are standing rewards for certain monsters outside of formal quests. Amanda seems annoyed by the obviousness of the question, confirming that there are. She explains that while emergency situations don't pay, at least there's no penalty for acting. Her gaze hardens as she looks down at him, a clear warning in her eyes. But Loki's face lights up, completely misinterpreting her tone as a challenge to explore the deeper forest. His mind is already made up, his determination to conquer the forest now stronger than ever. Amanda finally snaps, telling him to understand the system and value his own life, because recklessness will get him killed. But Loki is undeterred, moving on to his next question with a smug look. He's been grilling her for information, leaving the receptionist completely drained. Amanda finally snaps, telling him to read a book if he's that curious. She warns him that the guild's archives are carefully guarded, and damaging them would have severe consequences. But the warning only seems to fuel his excitement, a manic grin spreading across his face. He walks away, relieved that he managed to get the information he needed without raising more suspicion. He glances at the request board, noting that everything is written on wooden planks instead of paper. A familiar voice calls out to him, and he turns to see who it is. Jink waves him over, proudly showing off his own newly acquired guild card. With a matching grin, Loki reveals his own card, officially marking his new life as a hunter. The girl suggests they split their earnings, but Loki quickly realizes her math is a little off. Jink turns to Loki, asking if he has any plans before he goes to sell the Goblin's sword. With a cheerful smile, Loki immediately offers to tag along. Jink leads the way through the bustling streets, pointing out the weapon shop just ahead. The shop's owner, a stern-looking blacksmith, inspects the blade and makes an initial offer. Loki's eyes light up as he immediately tries to haggle for a much higher price. The other children explain how hard they fought for the sword and that they plan to split the earnings 4 ways. But the blacksmith simply lets out a tired sigh, completely unimpressed by their plea. He crosses his arms, explaining he can't take a loss, and offers a lower final price if they want an even split. Loki's face falls, his first attempt at negotiation ending in complete and utter failure. Loki looks down, seemingly accepting the blacksmith's final offer. But then he points out that since it's a used sword, it'll just be sold outside anyway. The blacksmith gruffly confirms that's exactly what he plans to do. Loki then reveals he's already seen a similar sword for sale at a much higher price. The blacksmith is caught off guard as Loki points out the massive profit margin. He tries to bluster his way through, insisting he won't go any higher. But Loki just smiles, ready to play his final card. He brings up the hunter who bought this very sword just 10 days ago. and asks if the blacksmith wasn't just planning to resell it all along. The blacksmith grits his teeth as Loki offers a new, much more favorable price. He even offers to throw in a small dagger as a personal gift for Pata. The blacksmith finally caves, agreeing to Loki's price as the children celebrate their victory. But with the deal done, Loki immediately asks how much it would cost to buy that same dagger. With his pockets full, he finally upgrades his gear, promising himself he'll make smarter purchases next time. He celebrates finding a proper place to sleep, his new life finally falling into place. For the first time in this world, he has a real bed to call his own. After a good night's rest, he decides it's time to get back to work. He takes a moment to appreciate the small details of the town, from its magic lamps to its wooden request boards. But his sightseeing is interrupted by Amanda, who compliments him on his new look. He gets straight to business, asking her about a specific request he's interested in. He's interested in an F-rank request that comes with special permission. But Amanda explains there's a catch. She screams that he's required to form a party, reminding him he's still just a rookie. Loki isn't thrilled, knowing that for him, there's no real benefit to party play. He understands the logic of splitting roles, with a hunter, a scout, and a carrier. But he's confident he can handle the forest's monsters alone and refuses to share his hard-earned experience. So with a silent apology to Amanda, he heads out, only to be stopped by the town guard. The guard offers a friendly warning, telling him to be back before sunset. The unexpected concern catches Loki off guard. He reflects on the feeling of being worried about, a concept that feels entirely foreign to him. With a confident wave, Loki assures the guard he'll be careful and heads back into the wild. He returns to the first stratum of the Palmyra Great Forest, ready to begin the grind. He mentally calculates the rewards for each monster, realizing the mole creatures are the most profitable. But for now, he decides to test his new skills on a simple horned rabbit. He watches its movements, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Remembering how effortlessly Jink handled the same creature, he steals his resolve. His first strike is clumsy, missing the rabbit and hitting a tree instead. But he quickly recovers, celebrating the fact that his higher level makes his movements feel sharper. He realizes that even for an ordinary person, the benefits of his status screen are immense. With newfound confidence, he begins hunting with ruthless efficiency, his skills improving with every kill. He decides that with his new skills, he can take on a goblin without any of his old tricks. He dodges the creature's clumsy swing with practiced ease, and lands a clean, decisive strike with his new dagger. A familiar thrill washes over him, the tangible feeling of growth reminding him of his old gaming days. With a determined shout, he declares that he'll just keep taking them down, one by one. But the reality of the aftermath begins to sink in. He sits beside the fallen creature, the adrenaline slowly starting to fade, and a wave of nausea suddenly hits him with overwhelming force. He realizes just how gruesome and visceral the experience truly is. The smell and the feeling of it all are a harsh reminder that this is no longer just a game. His only knowledge of this process comes from a distant memory of a science class dissection. But the reality is far messier, a clumsy and brutal task that gets harder with every second. He feels something solid inside the creature's chest, a sudden, unexpected discovery. With a hesitant hand, he pulls it out, realizing it must be the magic stone Jink mentioned. A small, crystalline object rests in his palm, the first real spoils of his hunt. Now for the next step, harvesting the subjugation parts, starting with the wrist. He carefully tries to find the joint, the grim task testing his resolve. And with that, the gruesome work is finally done. But it took him an entire hour just to process a single goblin. He stares down at his hands, the brutal reality of his new profession sinking in. He kneels by the river, trying to wash away the filth of his first real hunt. Amanda's words echo in his mind, but he still believes going solo is the only efficient path. He curses his own naivety. This isn't a game where he can just retry after failing. His hands are slick with blood, his new knife barely usable. But getting frustrated won't change anything. He has a quota to meet, and he will meet it. With a surge of pure grit, he forces himself to get back to work. Back at the guild, he presents his haul to Amanda, who notes his success against the armed goblin. She's genuinely impressed, admitting it's a remarkable amount for a first-timer. Her sharp gaze seems to see right through him. She then comments on his disheveled appearance, leaving Loki completely flustered. Amanda unleashes her fury, scolding him for going out so unprepared. She can't believe he's asking about basic equipment. After nearly getting himself killed, she points a stern finger, ordering him to go wash up immediately. Loki walks away, realizing he was just treated like a child. Because he has won. With his earnings, he finally gets to enjoy a proper meal from the guild's cafeteria. He devours the food with a hunger born from days of survival. But the intensity of the day's events has left him without much of an appetite, asking only for a cold drink. A simple glass of ice water is placed before him, but the sight of it stops him cold, his eyes wide with a strange realization. The vendor asks if something is wrong, but Loki can only stammer that it's nothing. He sits alone, observing the other patrons of the guild. His attention is drawn to a man wearing a familiar pair of glasses. He remembers his old boss explaining that style was centuries out of date back on Earth. It's just one of many anachronisms he's noticed, a strange mix of old and new technology. Of course, this world's history is different, but the inconsistencies are starting to add up, and it all points back to one person, the hero Takuya, who must have brought modern knowledge with him. He briefly considers the implications before shaking his head, deciding to focus on his own survival for now. Meanwhile, Amanda heads to the kitchen with a request. The cook immediately guesses she's talking about the new rookie. He comments that for a first hunt, Loki's haul was impressive, even if the preparation was a bit messy. The cook teases Amanda, saying it's a shame to see her so flustered over a rookie. He adds that if this promising newcomer earns a lot, the guild will prosper too. Back at his table, Loki sets his first major goal, a new short sword worth a small fortune. He begins his research, learning about the low-rank monsters that roam the plains. But the deeper forest holds far greater threats, like spiders, wolf packs, and even massive orcs. He realizes that if he wants to avoid the gruesome work of harvesting, he'll have to change his hunting grounds. He slams the book down, frustrated that the monster guide uses ranks instead of simple levels. He knows that in a game he would have recklessly pushed for efficiency, but in this world, that kind of thinking is a death sentence. Just then, Amanda's voice cuts through his thoughts, announcing his earnings are ready. The cook proudly announces his total haul, an impressive sum for just half a day's work. Loki's mind is absolutely blown by the sheer amount of money he's made. The cook explains to Amanda that this is the rookie who brought in the impressive haul. Loki immediately asks if the quality of the materials affects the final payout. The cook confirms this, explaining there's a 5-tier grading system, and Loki's haul was all B rank. A spark of excitement fills his eyes as he asks the cook to teach him the secret to getting a high rating. The cook advises him that while passion is good, he also needs to remember to rest. But Amanda immediately shuts down the idea, reminding him that he's still just a rookie. Loki's mind spirals, already calculating the most efficient ways to hunt, earn money, and get better gear. Just then, a new voice calls out his name with a confident smile. She offers to teach him the basics of hunting herself, a mysterious glint in her eye. Amanda's smile is anything but reassuring, promising to teach him a lesson he won't soon forget. But Loki is completely oblivious, just thrilled at the prospect of getting new gear. His boundless energy leaves Amanda completely drained, warning him not to push himself too hard. She then hands him a small silver coin, telling him to take it with him. He learns it's a special coin used at the local church for a status appraisal. A thought crosses his mind. He's always been curious how others check their status without a screen like his. Just then, Jink's voice cuts through his thoughts, asking if he's finished for the day. The other children are with him, explaining they were just about to head out on an errand. And suddenly, an idea clicks into place for our hero. With a bright smile, he offers the coin to Jink, saying it's the perfect gift. Jink questions why Loki would pass up a free status appraisal. He admits it's been a while since his last one, but he's still hesitant to accept. But Loki has one condition. He wants to see exactly how the process works in this town. He plays it off as simple curiosity, wondering if it's different everywhere. It's a flimsy excuse, but one he hopes they'll accept. Jink explains that a black stone slate will display his acquired skills and their levels. Loki seems a little underwhelmed, asking if that's really all it shows. He presses further, wondering if there are any other stats or numbers involved. The girl suddenly understands, asking if he means the total number of skills. She proudly lists her own, completely oblivious to Loki's horrified reaction. Jink explains that it's best to keep one's skills a secret from strangers. The girl can't understand why anyone would need to hide their abilities. Their argument is cut short by an angry nun who scolds them for being a nuisance at the church entrance. She quickly calms down, her attention drawn to the unfamiliar face in their group. The children eagerly introduce Loki, explaining he's a strong new hunter who's been helping them. As they walk toward the church, the nun offers her assistance should he ever need it. Loki immediately turns on his corporate charm, thanking her profusely and promising to work hard. She pats his head, reminding him that the goddess is always watching over his actions, and that by living a virtuous life, he will surely earn her divine grace. But Loki knows the truth. That acorn-headed being is no goddess, and she's definitely not watching over him. Jink explains that while everyday tasks grant experience, hunting monsters is the most efficient way to gain skills. Loki listens intently, realizing the skills one can learn are tied directly to their level. With their conversation over, Jink announces it's time for him to run some errands. Loki agrees, adding that he doesn't want to miss dinner at his inn. The children wave a cheerful goodbye, their business at the church concluded. He offers a final wave before heading back to his new temporary home. He arrives back at the inn, a simple but welcome sight after a long day. Loki steps into his room, letting out a heavy sigh of relief. He's grateful for the fish he had for dinner, knowing he couldn't have stomached any more meat. The memory of his hunt comes flooding back, the smell, the blood, and the brutal reality of taking a life. He stares at the lantern, realizing this world is undeniably real. His thoughts drift back to the acorn-headed being who sent him here. He finally understands its mocking words about his special gift. The nun's talk of virtue was just this world's version of experience points and leveling up. He once thought there was an unspoken rule about not fighting over the final blow. But the truth is, no one else even knows about the experience bonus. The same goes for the skill list he's been obsessing over. While he can see a full tree of potential abilities, they can only see what they've already learned. Their status appraisal is nothing more than a simple confirmation of acquired skills. He's the only one who can see his levels, his stats, and his potential, a true cheat ability in its own right. And that's exactly why he can't help but see this world as just another game. He dismisses Amanda's concern, just as he brushes off the worries of others. He even wonders if the children are just using him for their own gain. After all, in his old world, he never would have given kids like them a second thought. But here his efforts are truly rewarded. Here he can actually become strong. The old yearning for power, the one that fueled his Demon King persona, begins to resurface. He refuses to ever feel that helpless and miserable again. He knows that if he stays complacent, the acorn-headed god will just let him rot. For a fleeting moment, he wonders if it's too late to ask to be sent back home. But in the darkness, a new resolve begins to form. The lantern in his room suddenly goes out, plunging him into total darkness. His thoughts turn to the legend of the Demon King, a being clad entirely in black, a villain who was ultimately defeated by the summoned hero, Takuya. Loki scoffs at the idea of being a hero, declaring he'd rather become the Demon King and conquer this world himself. The quiet night hangs over the town, a silent witness to his newfound ambition. He curses the acorn-headed god's hands-off approach, deciding to do things his own way. He doesn't know why he was brought here, but he's determined to live for himself and himself alone. And yet, a memory of the 3 children flashes in his mind. He looks out the window, wondering if he should tell them the truth about who he really is. But he quickly dismisses the thought, deciding it's a secret he'll have to keep. The next morning, Loki wakes up in agony, his entire body aching from the strain. He realizes he's been pushing his de-aged body far too hard these past few days. Ever since he arrived, he hasn't felt the presence of that acorn-headed god at all. With no guidance or mission, he's been left to figure everything out on his own. And his biggest issue right now is his complete lack of physical stamina. Since his status screen doesn't show a stamina stat, he spent the last 3 days doing his own physical training. He decides to take it easy for the day, his body already at its limit. But his quiet morning is shattered as someone comes tumbling down a nearby hill. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the familiar face. It's the 3 children, and once again they're running for their lives. Jink sprints into action, shouting that he's coming to help. With his dagger drawn, a look of fierce determination crosses his face. He takes down a bizarre 2-headed creature with a single powerful strike. He turns to the person he saved, asking if they're all right. A small child runs toward a woman who was apparently the one in danger. The woman reassures the child with a warm hug, telling them not to worry. Loki and another man watch from a distance, the man commenting on the woman's surprising strength. Later, Jink reports to the same man, who notes how early he's finished for the day. Jink explains he's already met his quota and is just heading home. The man is impressed by his consistency, calling him a promising hunter. But Loki admits that he'd rather not stand out if he can help it. The man understands but explains that he can't afford to let his own income drop. Loki's mind is already racing, dreaming of the weapons and armor he'll buy once he starts earning big. The man tells him that if he really wants to lay low, he should just give up, since most hunters here only make small change. Loki realizes that the practical, unassuming clothes of the locals are a deliberate choice. It all clicks into place. Selling monster parts to specialized shops is far more profitable. He understands that if he wants to be seen as a competent hunter, he'll have to stand out by bringing in high-quality materials. With a sigh, he accepts that if he wants to rank up, he has no other choice. But a new worry surfaces as he thinks about carrying all that reward money around. The man turns back, surprised, asking if Loki didn't know he could just deposit his earnings at the guild. Loki's eyes widen in utter disbelief at this revelation. He immediately sprints back to the guild, begging them to take his money for safekeeping. He later complains to himself, wondering why Amanda never mentioned such a crucial detail. He imagines his hard-earned cash being stolen by bandits in an instant, or worse, disappearing from his inventory due to some kind of system bug. Lost in thought, he accidentally bumps into a stranger on the street. The man offers a friendly apology as Loki admits it was his own fault. But as the man walks away, Loki notices the shop he just came from. It's a high-end jewelry store, a place he never would have expected to see here. Peeking inside, he's greeted by an elegantly dressed woman with a mysterious air. The woman greets him with a knowing smile, asking if he's here to trade in magic stones. Loki is stunned to learn that all the jewelry in the shop is made from these very stones. His eyes sparkle at the sight, and the woman notes his obvious fascination. She offers to teach him a special lesson about the stones he seems to love so much. She explains that the color of a magic stone determines its elemental attribute. She hands him a small, dark stone, and a realization begins to dawn on him. He realizes he's holding a magic stone with a specific elemental property. While non-elemental stones are useful for daily life, she asks what purpose the rarer ones serve. A sudden, game-changing thought flashes through Loki's mind. She reveals they can be used to enchant weapons and armor, imbuing them with powerful attributes. Loki clenches his fist, the gears in his mind turning rapidly. He imagines himself dual-wielding blades, each imbued with a different element. The shop owner smiles, noting that he's already picturing the possibilities. He remembers the blacksmith mentioning an enchanter in town, but the cost was prohibitive. But his excitement is immediately cut short by a shocking revelation. She presents him with a rare, high-quality magic stone worth a staggering 50,000 beak. Loki can't believe his eyes. The mole's stone was only worth a fraction of that. She calmly explains that earth elemental stones are less valuable, mainly used for construction. But Loki still can't quite accept the massive difference in price. With a dazzling smile, she tells him to come back when he's earned more money. Loki walks away with a heavy sigh, the weight of his new goals settling in. He realizes that just getting basic gear is expensive enough, let alone enchanting it with elemental power. But his imagination runs wild with the possibilities, dreaming of a future where he's a master of combined magic. His grand ambitions are cut short by a simple thought. It's almost time for dinner. But a sudden, familiar aroma stops him dead in his tracks. His mind conjures a grand vision of a magnificent feast, a taste of a world he thought he'd left behind. He follows the scent through the streets, wondering what could possibly smell so good. He bursts through a doorway, his mind refusing to believe what he's smelling. His eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the man standing before him. A chef in a turban holds up a ladle of curry, asking if Loki knows what it is. Loki's face lights up with pure joy, absolutely certain he knows what this is. But the chef holds up a hand, telling him to wait. He asks if Loki is truly prepared for what he's about to order. The man reveals his only menu item, a masterpiece of spices that costs a staggering 9,000 beak. Loki's jaw drops, the price far beyond anything he could have imagined. But his body is already craving it, a hunger he can no longer control. With a desperate shout, he slams his money down, demanding a plate. The chef's smile widens, impressed by the boy's determination. Loki's eyes sparkle with anticipation, his hunger reaching its peak. And before him sits a steaming plate of what is unmistakably curry, a memory of his old life surfaces, a time when this was just a simple lunch break. He takes his first eager bite, and an explosion of flavor completely overwhelms his senses. The intense spice is almost too much to handle, a searing pain he wasn't prepared for. But even as his body trembles from the heat, he discovers a deep, savory flavor hidden beneath the spice. He can't stop himself, shoveling spoonful after spoonful into his mouth. In an instant, the entire plate is completely clean. He stands up, his body still reeling from the experience. With tears of joy in his eyes, he offers a heartfelt thank you for the incredible meal. He offers a final wave to the chef, his stomach finally full. He can't believe he just spent 9,000 beak on a single meal. But the memory of that perfect flavor makes it all worth it. He runs off with a renewed sense of purpose, promising to return one day. But as he walks, he can't shake the feeling that the taste was a little too familiar. He wonders if the ridiculously high price is meant to be a reward for those who can afford it. He knows he was reckless, drawn in by a simple smell without a second thought. Still, he can't help but smile, the delicious memory still fresh in his mind. But his blissful moment is interrupted by a voice calling out his name. He turns to see a woman and a young boy who introduces herself as the mother of Mesa, the girl from the forest. Loki realizes this must be Mesa's family pharmacy, a place he feels like he's seen before. Her mother adds that she often goes into the forest herself, so it's possible they've crossed paths. Just then, the door to the shop bursts open with a clatter. It's Mesa, who excitedly asks Loki to come play with them tomorrow. She insists it'll be fun, explaining they can cool off in the river and even catch fish. The mention of fish seems to catch Loki's full attention. Without waiting for an answer, she sprints off to tell Jink and Pata the good news. Her mother can only apologize for her daughter's whirlwind of energy. The other boy reminisces about his own childhood as Mesa's mother begs Loki to come along. She thanks him profusely, adding that she feels much safer knowing he'll be there to protect them. Loki smiles, admitting that as long as he's with the children, he'll have fun. He lets out a hearty laugh, amused that the children are the ones who asked for his help. He remembers fighting alongside Jink, knowing that despite his status screen, the boy is far more reliable in a real fight. Mesa's mother suddenly remembers something, offering him a small gift. She places a small vial filled with dark pellets into his hands. He looks down at the vial, completely unsure of what he's just been given. The boy explains it's a special medicine to help with muscle pain and fatigue from his daily hunts. Loki's face lights up with gratitude, immediately asking how much he owes them for the gift. But she simply smiles, explaining it's a thank you for saving her daughter from the goblins. Loki frantically refuses, insisting that he has to pay for such a valuable item. She stammers, trying to find the right words to explain her gratitude. But Loki's mind immediately goes to a darker place, wondering if this is just some cheap placebo. She insists that while she's grateful for his offer, she can't possibly accept payment for such an expensive gift. Loki is completely taken aback, realizing her concern was for his wallet, not the other way around. He remembers the expensive spices and herbs used in the curry, realizing this medicine must be just as potent. So instead she offers him a simple stomach medicine, something he can actually afford. Loki gratefully accepts the new vial, promising to return if it proves effective. He offers a final wave as the two of them watch him go. The next day he meets up with Jink and Pata, who are already waiting for him by the river. Mesa rushes to join them, her energy infectious as the group prepares for their day of fun. Jink points out that Loki bought a fishing rod, even if it's the cheapest one available. He explains that while Pata carries the gear, he and Loki will keep watch on the way. As they leave the town gates, Loki wonders how long the journey will take. Jink confidently estimates it'll be about a 2-hour walk. The group sets off with Pata silently lamenting the long trek just to go play. Loki can't help but be impressed by how wild and untamed this world truly is. He lets out a deep, contented sigh, taking in the fresh air. They finally arrive at the river, with Mesa carefully making her way across the rocks. Jink suggests it's time for lunch, but Loki admits he hasn't caught a single fish yet. He leans back, finding the peaceful scenery a welcome change of pace. But Mesa reveals her mother packed a lunch, and Pata is even willing to share his catch. Jink can't help but tease Loki for his complete failure at fishing. Mesa proudly explains her mother also packed a magic tool for starting a fire. The mention of a magic tool immediately piques Loki's interest, and he begs Jink to show him how it works. Jink explains the simple mechanics of the device, which uses a magic stone as fuel. With a simple twist, a small flame bursts to life, much to Loki's and Pata's amazement. Loki holds the fire starter, marveling at a tool that can create fire without any magic at all. He eagerly lights the campfire, ready for a meal, as Jink wonders just how ignorant Loki can possibly be. The smoke from their small campfire drifts lazily into the afternoon sky, and soon enough their freshly caught fish is sizzling over the open flame. The four of them enjoy their meal, a simple moment of pure happiness. But Loki decides to add another dish to their feast. He proudly presents a pile of cooked bugs, much to Jink's disgust. Loki insists they're delicious with a little salt, trying to convince his skeptical friends. Mesa takes a bite and her face lights up, the unexpected flavor winning her over completely. With their stomachs full, Jink suggests a team competition to burn off some energy. The others are immediately on board, wondering how they should divide the teams. Loki offers a simple solution, a convenient game he calls Janken. The children are completely baffled, having never heard of such a thing, and so they prepare to play their very first round of rock, paper, scissors. Jink and Mesa are fired up for the competition, declaring they won't hold back. Loki offers a word of encouragement to a hesitant-looking Pata, but Pata is still confused, unsure of what he's supposed to do. So Loki resorts to gestures, acting out the rules of the game for him. Pata's face lights up with a smile, finally understanding the plan. With the game underway, Loki shouts directions as they work together in the river. He guides Pata from above, coordinating their movements to catch their prize, but he quickly realizes he's been pushing the boy a little too hard. He offers a quick apology, suggesting they take things at a slower pace. With a gentle smile, he tells Pata not to overdo it. Meanwhile, Jink and Mesa are busy splashing each other in the river. But Pata stands perfectly still, a sudden realization dawning on him. For the first time, he can finally understand what Loki is saying. Loki's voice suddenly cuts through the air, shouting for the others. But his panic is cut short by a sudden realization of his own. Pata grabs him in a tight hug, overjoyed that he can finally talk to his new friend. The others can only watch in amazement, wondering if he's telling the truth. Loki's eyes widen in utter disbelief. He realizes that just by talking to him, he's been acting as a teacher, granting Pata experience and language comprehension. But he quickly snaps out of it, realizing this isn't the time to be analyzing game mechanics. Mesa congratulates Pata, calling his new skill a well-earned reward for his efforts. To celebrate, Loki offers to take them all to a special restaurant he knows. He leads the way back to the curry shop, the others following with a mix of excitement and confusion. But the intense spice proves to be too much for Pata and Mesa, while Loki just gives a satisfied thumbs up. A few days later, a quiet morning dawns over the town of Bazat. Loki wakes up with a stretch, noticing his body feels significantly lighter than before. He looks at the medicine he received, realizing it must be incredibly valuable and that he needs to ask about the price. He rushes to the guild, his new goal set, earn a staggering 1.5 million beacon. While grabbing a quick bite, he decides to check his status for any updates. A confident smile spreads across his face, ready to take on the day's challenges. His lunge and presence detection skills have both reached a respectable level 3. He stands in the guild hall, looking up at a familiar face on the second floor. It's Amanda, and she's furious, demanding to know why he hasn't shown his face in days. Loki mutters to himself, admitting it's just more convenient to deposit his earnings without her lectures. Her anger quickly fades, replaced by a hint of loneliness as she tries to explain herself. But she quickly changes the subject, cheerfully announcing that his promotion to F rank has been approved. She mentions that another hunter was being reckless just 6 days ago, making Loki's progress even more impressive. Seeing as it's perfect timing, she offers to withdraw some of his earnings for him. With his new rank secured, Loki declares his next goal, to gear up and take on the Rocker Plains. Amanda presents him with his brand new F rank guild card, officially marking his promotion. Amanda claps her hands together, telling him how well the new rank suits him. But Loki notices the material of the card itself has changed, something he wasn't expecting. Amanda casually mentions that if he wants, he can have it changed. She explains that each rank corresponds to a different material, from simple iron all the way up to legendary adamantite. Loki asks if that means he can just upgrade the material whenever he wants. With a sly smile, she confirms that he can, for an additional processing fee. The realization hits him like a truck. This world has microtransactions. She explains the guild can't just give away rare materials, but he knows it's just another way to squeeze money out of him. He takes a moment to process this new, frustrating layer of the system. He then asks her to confirm if S rank is really made of adamantite, to which she playfully responds. Loki presses further, asking if S rank is truly the highest tier. Amanda seems intrigued by his line of questioning. He explains that for the ultimate rank, adamantite just feels a little underwhelming. She lets out a tired sigh, wondering why he's so fixated on such a strange detail. But she reveals there were once even higher ranks, held by legendary figures who have long since vanished. She explains that the disappearance of those ranks is a popular topic, which is why she brought it up. Loki realizes this means there are others out there far more suited to this life than he is. His thoughts immediately turn to the legendary hero Takuya, the one with all the cheat powers. He imagines the hero surrounded by a party, realizing a prince would have no need to be a simple hunter. The crushing unfairness of it all sends him spiraling into despair. He wonders if that legendary hero is still alive, and a part of him wants to meet him. But a shadowy figure appears behind him, offering to tell him everything he wants to know. Loki's face lights up, eagerly asking if she'll really explain the mystery of the lost ranks. But her offer was just a cruel joke, and she chases him around the guild, telling him to forget such lofty ambitions. He escapes her wrath, completely drained by her overwhelming presence. But he quickly shakes it off, his focus now entirely on preparing for the Rocker Plains. His preparations are a whirlwind of activity, gathering information, buying antidotes, and stocking up on potions. All that's left is to buy new weapons and armor, and he vows to be ready by morning. But the blacksmith informs him that custom gear will take at least 5 days to complete. He offers a slightly faster option for leather armor, but the delay still leaves Loki completely stunned. Loki melts into a puddle of despair, wondering if he's finally lost his mind. He explains he needs to be ready today, but the blacksmith offers only off-the-rack armor. The man reminds him that proper armor is a matter of life and death, and it must be fitted perfectly. He slams his hand down, explaining that child-sized gear is always a custom order. With that settled, he tells Loki to browse the weapons while he gets measured. Loki decides that even without armor, he can at least take a look at what's available. He calls out to the blacksmith, asking to see a specific sword from the display case. The blacksmith seems hesitant, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. But after a moment, he reluctantly agrees to let him see it. Loki's face lights up with pure joy, finding a blade that's the perfect size and well within his budget. But he's stunned to learn the sword has a max mana increase enchantment, yelling that with such a useless ability, it'll never sell. The blacksmith explains that a mana boost is standard for a mage's staff, but useless for a warrior unless they're a high-level dual wielder. Loki is completely baffled, asking why he would forge a sword he knew he couldn't sell. The blacksmith turns the question back on him, but Loki can only explain he heard about the man's enchanting skills from the jewelry shop owner. A memory of the shop owner's playful teasing seems to confirm the blacksmith's story. Loki holds the blade, still trying to understand the logic behind its creation. He wonders aloud if it was a prototype or maybe a gift for someone. The blacksmith's stern expression softens into one of quiet sorrow. He finally reveals that it was a sword he forged for his own son. Loki's face lights up with a sudden awkward realization, exclaiming that the blacksmith has a son. Loki immediately clamps his hand over his mouth, realizing his terrible mistake. The blacksmith curses himself for even bringing up the topic in the first place. He apologizes for his outburst, admitting he's just worried about his son, who is an adventurer around Loki's age. Loki asks if he should really take the sword, knowing it's a precious memento. But the blacksmith insists, saying his son would be happy to know it's being put to good use. With a determined smile, Loki gratefully accepts the offer. He grips the hilt of his new weapon, but the blacksmith isn't finished yet. His tone turns deadly serious, forbidding Loki from heading to the rocker plains without proper gear. The sudden command leaves Loki completely stunned. He knows he can't lie his way out of this one, the blacksmith's warning hitting its mark. But Loki insists that he's going anyway, his mind already made up. He explains that the Palmyra forest is no longer a challenge. The experience gains far too low for him to progress. He's already reached level 8, his stats growing with every kill, and he feels ready for the next step. If the monsters on the rocker plains are only F rank, then he's confident he can handle them. The blacksmith threatens to take back the sword, telling him he can't go until his armor is ready. Loki knows that any normal person would listen, but he's not a normal person. His mind flashes back to his gaming days, to the endless grind and the pursuit of becoming stronger than anyone else. With a crazed look in his eyes, he declares he can't wait 4 days and will head out with nothing but a knife if he has to. The blacksmith's gaze hardens, his patience clearly wearing thin, and the sheer intensity of that look is enough to stop Loki dead in his tracks. The blacksmith grits his teeth, his frustration finally boiling over. He lets out a heavy sigh, wondering why Loki sounds exactly like his son. He explains that he poured his soul into forging a weapon for his son, but the boy still died anyway. With a heavy heart, the blacksmith tells Loki to wait right there. He returns with a set of armor, a confident smile on his face as he declares it a perfect fit. Loki can only stare, realizing this must have belonged to the blacksmith's son. The man explains it's made of a special material that can even block wind magic, a gift to keep him safe. But his tone turns deadly serious, warning Loki that if he dies, he'll personally hunt him down and finish the job. Loki can only offer a nervous grin, admitting that the threat is certainly motivating. With the gear settled, the blacksmith leads him out back to the shop's training grounds. The blacksmith tells him to give the new blade a proper swing. Loki grips the hilt, the memory of the man's son weighing on his mind. He realizes the blacksmith was waiting for someone who would truly cherish this weapon. With a burst of motion, he tests the sword's balance and weight. He feels a connection to the blade, a bond forged from another's memory. The blacksmith asks for his thoughts, and Loki confirms it's a perfect fit, light and easy to handle. He turns back with a confident smile, promising the man that he will not die. A system-like notification announces he's acquired the sword and armor filled with memories. With a sigh of relief, Loki feels like the tutorial phase of this world is finally complete. But before he leaves, he pulls out the medicine vials and asks about the price. But the blacksmith refuses payment, insisting the medicine isn't for sale. The two get into a shouting match, with Loki demanding to pay and the blacksmith refusing to accept. Their argument echoes through the street, a battle of pure stubbornness. Loki walks away, grumbling about the old man but having only paid for the sword. He can't help but feel like he just completed a secret game event, saving money but feeling a little awkward about it. With his gear finally settled, he arrives at his next destination. He stands before the town church, ready for his final preparations. The nun notes that, while they've spoken before, this is his first time actually stepping inside. Within the hallowed halls, a lone figure kneels in quiet prayer. Loki looks up at the statues of the goddess as the nun welcomes him, complimenting his new look. He asks the nun if this is how one offers a prayer to the goddess. The man asks for a status appraisal, and Loki follows, eager to see the process. He's surprised to find that the entire ritual is performed in plain sight. Loki can't help but feel grateful for his own convenient private status screen. He then asks the nun if the size of one's donation affects the appraisal's detail. The nun explodes, furiously denying that the goddess's blessing can be bought. Loki simply looks down, feigning innocence after riling her up. She explains that large donations can earn one an invitation to the fan-mail theocracy, but she quickly dismisses the idea, saying it's a world away from their simple lives. Loki can only smirk, recognizing the familiar scent of money and influence. He imagines the grand fan-mail theocracy, realizing the donations are just a way to fund a wealthy nation. He drops a coin into the box, having come to the church for a very specific reason. The real reason he's here is something he's only just learned about: job selection. He never expected a prayer to be tied to his job, but he'll take any advantage he can get. The nun explains that this job selection is a blessing from the goddess, and he should pray for the one he wants. Loki repeats the word blessing, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. She explains that having a job makes it easier to level up related skills and even grants unique abilities. He closes his eyes, realizing this is yet another RPG element in what is supposed to be his new reality. He immediately connects it to the idea of class-specific growth bonuses, a classic RPG mechanic. He even considers the possibility of job advancements, a path to even greater strength. The nun explains that she's only ever seen beginner and intermediate jobs, but she mentions the existence of a revelation class, a special job held by the town's priest. She laughs, adding that in a small town like this, you only ever see the common ones. With that, she heads off to call the priest for him. Loki is stunned, telling her not to drop such a game-changing term so casually. The nun asks the priest if he's still available for a job selection. The man smiles, confirming he can still perform the divine ritual. He introduces himself as Triel, the town's priest, as Loki gives his own name. Loki gulps, the weight of the man's title finally sinking in. This is Triel, the holder of the legendary special ability class job. Loki admits he doesn't feel any special aura from the man. He asks to begin the ritual, wondering what kind of special abilities he might unlock. He asks if someone as ignorant as him can even receive such a blessing. The priest reassures him that everyone's path is different, and it's fine to learn as he goes. He explains that each person is guided by one of 6 goddesses, like Farron, the goddess of harvest, or Regal, the stern goddess of war. There is also Alicia, the goddess of love, and Rhea, the solemn goddess of sin, Phil, the gentle goddess of life, and finally Riste, the shrewd goddess of commerce. The priest explains that the 6 goddesses love all of humanity equally, but Loki realizes the acorn-headed god who summoned him isn't one of them. He asks if the people of Bazat worship all 6, and the priest confirms they do. Loki can't believe it could possibly be that simple. He asks if he's supposed to choose just one of them to pray to. The priest smiles, explaining that he can pray to all of them, though some people get unexpected results. He instructs Loki to kneel and pray with all his heart for the job he desires. Loki looks at the statues, realizing this is his chance to truly rely on a god. He clasps his hands together, desperately praying for the job he wants. With his eyes closed, he focuses all of his will into a single, heartfelt plea. He prays for a close combat job, one that will boost his strength and defense. But a strange voice suddenly echoes in his mind, catching him completely off guard. He hears a woman's voice telling him to prepare himself. The voice gently tells him that it's all right now, and that he can open his eyes. He looks up, but it's not the priest who spoke. The voice sounds far too young. A brilliant light fills his vision as he looks up from his prayer, and before him stand 3 ethereal women, their presence completely overwhelming. One has the stern, unwavering gaze of a warrior, another looks on with a gentle, almost sorrowful expression, and the third offers a cold, knowing smile, her eyes filled with a dark amusement. The gentle-looking goddess asks him to identify himself. Loki stammers, realizing he's in the presence of actual goddesses, but the warrior goddess silences him, demanding he only answer their questions. An immense pressure suddenly slams him face first into the ground. The third goddess seems to dismiss him entirely, finding the situation irrelevant. She reaches out a hand, calling him an anomaly that doesn't belong in this world. With a terrifying look in her eyes, she declares that she will personally erase him. Loki can only stare in pure terror, pinned down by her overwhelming presence. He desperately tries to plead with Rhea, the goddess of sin, but the goddess of love intervenes, insisting they hear him out before passing judgment. Loki lets out a scream of pure terror, pinned by an unseen force. He gasps for air, certain that he's about to be executed without warning. The goddess of love asks him to explain who he is and why he has come to their world. Loki knows that one wrong word could mean his end, realizing this is an interrogation. He decides to tell the truth, explaining he was once Mamiya Yuto before being abducted. The goddess of war theorizes he was caught in a dimensional rift, which explains his sudden appearance. But when he tries to mention the acorn-headed god, his voice suddenly fails him. The other two goddesses sense something is wrong, as if his thoughts were suddenly blocked. Loki panics, realizing they can read his mind and that any lie will be exposed. But the goddess of love seems to believe him, confirming he was brought here against his will. Loki panics, thinking they're accusing him of having amnesia. But the goddess of war notes that while they can read his thoughts, they can't see any of his skills. The goddess of love wonders if he's hiding something beyond their perception. The goddess of sin concludes that this boy is far more dangerous than he appears. They debate what to do, realizing his unknown nature poses a serious threat to their world. Loki desperately begs them to listen, insisting he truly knows nothing about his situation. But a new powerful voice cuts him off, telling the foreign object to be silent. It commands him to know his place, the pressure becoming unbearable. The three goddesses can only look on in stunned silence. And Loki finally snaps, screaming that all gods are just selfish, incompetent fools. The goddess of war explodes in fury, declaring his insolence is worthy of death. But Loki just laughs in her face, mocking them for threatening him when they were about to kill him anyway. The goddess of sin agrees, ready to strike him down even if it means destroying the town in the process. Loki screams that they're no different from criminals, willing to sacrifice innocent lives for their own convenience. The goddess of love can only stare back, completely stunned by his accusation. He recounts his story, how he was abducted from his world and thrown into this forest without a choice. He describes his desperate fight for survival with no knowledge, no food, and no water. He was forced to fight monsters and eat raw fish just to stay alive. He remembers the overwhelming relief he felt when he finally met other people and reached the town of Bazat. He was just starting to enjoy this world, with every intention of living his life to the fullest. With tears streaming down his face, he begs them to tell him what he's done wrong, asking if it's a crime to simply fight to survive. He remembers the faces of the people who accepted him, the first time he'd ever felt truly happy. But now, facing these goddesses, he feels like it's all over, that he's going to die just like he always expected. He wonders if reincarnation is real, if he'll get another chance. And if he does, he hopes it's in a world like this one, where his efforts are finally rewarded. A gentle voice cuts through his thoughts, asking who he is. The goddess of love looks down at him, demanding to know his true identity. He insists he's no god, just a man who was finally starting to enjoy this world. She considers his words, then tells him she needs to confirm one last thing. Turning away, she asks if he was granted any skills before he arrived. She explains that they sometimes summon souls from other worlds, granting them special skills upon arrival. Loki clenches his fist, the word skills hitting him with the force of a revelation. He finally understands what a true isekai transfer is supposed to be like. With a heavy heart, he holds up 2 fingers, admitting he received 2 gifts. The first was being de-aged from his 32-year-old self, and the second was the ability to see his own status screen. He adds that while he can't confirm the de-aging, he knows the screen is real because of 2 hidden items he can't access. The goddess of war asks if he's lying, wondering how he could possibly see a status screen. Loki explains it's just like a game interface, showing his level, stats, and even a full tree of skills he can learn. The goddesses are stunned, wondering what this skill tree is, and why their divine sight can't perceive it. Loki is completely lost, asking them to explain in simpler terms who this Felza is. He explains that unlike everyone else, his skills are broken down into numerical points that he can freely allocate. The goddess of love is stunned, realizing this confirms he's connected to a higher-ranking god. Loki wonders if this Felza is some kind of superior being to the acorn-headed god, and it finally clicks. He understands why his status screen isn't the cheat power he always dreamed of. He admits that a skill powerful enough to threaten the world is beyond his comprehension, as the goddess realizes they can read his thoughts. The goddess of love admits they were wrong to be so suspicious and act without thinking. But Loki explodes, reminding them they were about to kill him without even hearing his story. And in a shocking turn, the three goddesses prostrate themselves before him, offering a sincere apology. Loki is completely flustered, admitting he was also out of line with his own harsh words. He awkwardly tries to change the subject, reminding them of his original reason for coming to the church. He asks if this means he can't even get a job after all that. He wonders if he's just not suited to be a hunter, but the goddess of war denies it. She explains that while the six of them manage this world, a lesser god handles the reverse side, and only blesses non-humans. Loki desperately asks if they can just send him home, but she admits they don't have that power. He stands alone before the three divine beings, his fate in their hands. But the goddess of love steps forward, insisting it's their duty to guide him. Loki realizes she was the only one who truly listened to his story from the start, and seeing her properly for the first time, he can't help but think she's beautiful. The unexpected compliment seems to completely short-circuit her divine mind. She frantically declares that since he's so ignorant, they will personally offer him their guidance. A new skill appears on his screen. Oracle, a one-way communication from the goddess. Loki asks if this means he'll be under constant surveillance from now on. The goddess of love reassures him they can't watch him that closely, but Loki knows he'll rarely need to return. She suddenly realizes a one-way skill is useless, as the goddess of war points out it's an ability only a divine child can learn. With a manic look, she declares this is both an apology and a special gift. The goddess of war warns that granting this power will drain her, but she's already made up her mind. Loki can only look on, realizing these divine beings are completely incapable of compromise. He wakes up back in his room, confirming it wasn't a dream as two new skills appear on his screen. But a quick check of his stats reveals he received no job bonuses at all. Still, he decides to look on the bright side. He can now contact the goddesses, and his real isekai life has finally begun. He decides to test his new divine communication skill, figuring it's just a simple Q&A session. But his mind is immediately flooded with the chaotic voices of all three goddesses arguing at once. He learns the skill is limited to once a day, a special ability for a divine child. But the slate he's using to communicate suddenly shatters, leaving him screaming that the skill is completely useless. He grits his teeth, cursing the incompetent goddesses for giving him such a worthless power. He tries to force himself to stay positive, even though he gained absolutely no useful information. His thoughts turn to the hierarchy of this world, with its managing goddesses and the higher-ranking gods above them. He reaffirms his decision to live for himself, even as he wonders if this is all part of the acorn-headed god's plan. The name of that higher god, Felza, echoes in his mind, a being he still knows nothing about. He remembers his desperate plea to the goddesses, the raw emotion of a man who was simply trying to survive. He reflects on how he ended up with a rare skill to communicate with the goddesses. But all he got was a one-sided lecture that felt like 2 minutes of pure hell. Back in town, he grabs a quick bite, telling the vendor he's finally heading to the Rocker Plains. The man notes how tired he looks, but Loki just brushes it off. He forces a smile, determined to push through and get back to the grind. But inside, he's fuming, furious that his precious time has been wasted by all these delays. He remembers the failed job selection, the forced donation, and the priest's kindness only making him feel worse. He mutters to himself that the goddesses have been nothing but a disaster for him. But as he walks through the town, a new thought suddenly stops him in his tracks. His eyes lock onto a large merchant wagon being loaded for a journey. He takes in the sights of the town, his mind now set on his next destination. Loki realizes the north gate is far busier than he expected. But the south gate is even more lively, finally giving him the true fantasy world experience he's been craving. He spots a group of hunters up ahead, a proper adventuring party. A brilliant idea strikes him. He'll just follow them and get a free escort to the Rocker Plains. He arrives at his destination, a vast open field stretching as far as the eye can see. The open terrain makes monsters easy to spot, but he worries about other hunters stealing his kills. He reaffirms his decision to go solo, knowing it's the only way to maximize his gains. Crouching in the tall grass, he prepares his gear, knowing he has no choice but to hunt. With a determined grin and his new sword in hand, he declares it's time to get to work. His first opponent is a massive praying mantis, and he's ready to test its strength. But the creature immediately vanishes into the tall grass, preparing for an ambush. Loki curses its natural camouflage, realizing he can't track it by sight alone. But a new plan quickly forms in his mind. He activates his presence detection skill, pinpointing the monster's exact location. The mantis is faster than he expected, knocking him to the ground with a powerful strike. Undeterred, Loki uses his lunge skill to close the distance in an instant. A manic grin spreads across his face as he charges in for the kill. His next target is a poison mouse, and he knows he has to finish it quickly before it calls for backup. But as the creature leaps forward, Loki is surprised by just how slow it actually is. He screams in panic, unable to stop his own momentum. The creature's body bursts, splattering him with a strange substance. He hits the ground as a notification announces he's acquired level 1 poison resistance. Before he can even process it, the skill immediately jumps to level 2. He stares at his screen in confusion, wondering how he leveled up so quickly from a single encounter. He realizes that these poison mice must be a delicacy for other, more dangerous monsters. Back at the guild, the cook inspects his haul, noting that one of the poison sacks was damaged. Loki admits his hand slipped on the first one, his inexperience costing him a perfect score. The cook notes how slow the mice are, asking if he plans to hunt in the Rulfa forest next. Loki considers this, realizing he might have overtrained in Palmyra and is ready for a greater challenge. A sudden realization hits him. He's been far too reckless. He knows that straying from the proper path is a surefire way to get killed. He's seen countless players lose everything by getting too cocky and rushing into danger. He tells the cook he won't even think about the rocker planes until he's completely satisfied with his strength. The cook warns him that the planes are on another level and an orc would send him flying. But the man points out that even if he goes to Rulfe, he won't be able to earn much by himself. It all comes down to a simple problem: the weight of the materials he can carry. The most valuable part of an orc is its meat, but there's no way he can haul it back alone. Loki agrees to think it over, accepting the man's practical advice. The cook just laughs, telling him to endure Amanda's lectures until he's ready for the next step. A receptionist calls out to another hunter, his payment now ready. Loki recognizes the party from before, the idea of teamwork still fresh in his mind. He calculates his own impressive earnings, enough to live comfortably for days. He realizes that for the average person here, his income is already well above the norm. But the thought of forming a party still feels inefficient, a net loss in experience and rewards. He'd have to find hunting grounds and then hire someone just to carry his loot. The biggest problem is that their goals would never align. He's here to pursue absolute strength. But his thoughts are violently interrupted as Amanda grabs him by the collar. She furiously asks when he started thinking about joining a party, as other hunters look on in amusement. She reminds him that he's the promising new rookie everyone's been talking about. One of the hunters glances back, a look of pure annoyance on his face. 4 days later, Loki sits alone in the tall grass, analyzing his progress. He's realized that the experience he gains from a monster depends on the level of the skill he's using. While Palmyra's monsters boost his lunge, the poison mice are perfect for leveling his new resistance skill. He deduces that if the weakest monsters have level 1 skills, then the poison mouse must have a much higher natural resistance. This means that for maximum efficiency, he needs to hunt stronger monsters now to make his future grind easier. But the constant need to find new hunting grounds is already wearing him down. He's also made the grim discovery that some of these creatures are cannibals. Because of this, he can't risk leaving his basket of materials unguarded for even a moment. And with a 2-hour round trip to town, constantly dropping off his haul is becoming a major hassle. He screams in frustration. For maximum efficiency, he needs to hunt everything in one place. He just needs a high platform to store his materials, somewhere the monsters can't reach. A shovel would be perfect, but then he remembers the earth magic he acquired from the mole. He sarcastically calls out for a mound of earth to appear, not expecting anything to happen. But to his utter shock, a pile of dirt materializes right in front of him. A quick check of his status screen confirms his mana has decreased. The spell actually worked. He remembers the trauma of trying to cast fire magic, how every attempt ended in failure. So with a new sense of purpose, he tries the earth magic incantation one more time. And a second, even larger mound appears, leaving him completely stunned. A sudden realization hits him. The trigger for magic isn't some grand chant or hand gesture. He decides to test his theory, commanding the earth to rise into a massive pile. But he quickly realizes it's still not high enough to keep the monsters at bay. He checks his mana, wondering if he can specify the shape of his creation. His first attempt to create stone pillars results in a clumsy, fragmented mess. And when he tries to make one large pillar, the spell fails completely, leaving him to wonder if he was too ambitious. But then, a new theory begins to form. A sudden understanding of how the incantations work. He realizes he has to combine specific keywords that are within the scope of his current skill level. With a confident shout, he calls for a long stone pillar to be generated. And a massive column of rock erupts from the ground, towering over him in an instant. Loki pumps his fist in triumph. With this power, he can finally create the perfect, efficient hunting ground. He stares up at his basket of materials, now wondering how he's supposed to get it down. But the results speak for themselves. His fixed-point hunting strategy is a massive success. Even if getting the loot down is a workout in itself, the efficiency is undeniable. He laughs, wishing he could tell his past self that the secret to magic was in his feet all along. But his moment of triumph is cut short by a voice from behind asking what he's doing. Loki jumps, startled by the sudden interruption. A hunter calls him the lonely rookie everyone's been talking about, wondering if this is why he's still solo. The man introduces himself as Adent, offering Loki the privilege of joining his party. But Loki just gives him a deadpan stare, completely uninterested in the offer. His blunt refusal leaves the other hunter utterly speechless. Adent explodes in anger, unable to believe he was just turned down. His party members join in, mocking Loki for being a cocky rookie who should just accept their kindness. They threaten to report him to the guild, but Loki just walks away, completely unfazed. Back at the guild, he recounts the incident to Amanda. She listens intently, analyzing Loki's current combat strength. She realizes he's not just hunting for money, but is actively trying to outpace the other parties. Loki smiles, relieved that she was worried about him, a fact she readily confirms. He explains that while he can't do much more than warn Aident's party, that's all he needs for now. He knows the guild expects hunters to handle their own problems, and dealing with clingy rivals is just a hassle. After all, it's not about winning or losing. Making enemies with the locals would be the worst possible outcome for his new life. After 4 long days of grinding, Loki has finally reached level 9. He needs to get to at least level 11 to avoid Aident's party, making a return to Palmyra completely out of the question. He thought Bazat was full of good people, but he's already managed to get himself into a troublesome situation. All he can do is hope that things don't get any more complicated from here. But the next day at the guild, he spots a brand new emergency request on the board. His eyes light up when he sees it's a request for poison mice, and the reward has been increased. The notice warns of a potential mass outbreak, as the number of mice has been steadily increasing, and a sudden horrifying thought crosses his mind. This might be his fault. From a nearby doorway, Adent's party watches him with suspicion. He realizes his basket of harvested materials has been acting as bait, attracting more and more of them to the area. The next day, Adent's party heads out of town ready for a hunt, but Loki quickly realizes they're following him, sticking to his trail like glue. He tries to ignore them, focusing on the hunt ahead, but a quick glance back confirms they're still there, watching his every move. Adent's party seems to be arguing amongst themselves, their plan already falling apart. Loki can only sigh, the constant harassment already wearing him down. His frustration finally boils over as he lets out an annoyed shout. He turns back, demanding to know how long they plan on following him, but Adent just plays dumb, insisting they're just moving to a new hunting ground. Loki calls their bluff, telling them to go somewhere else if they want to be efficient. Adent sneers, accusing Loki of encroaching on their territory. Loki wonders if they're just harassing him or if they're after his valuable materials. He finally relents, telling them he understands and will leave them be. But Adent's confusion turns to shock as Loki begins to cast a spell. In an instant, the basket is lifted high into the air on a newly formed pillar of stone. Loki realizes his earth magic has reached level 3, and if his theory is correct, he can now use even more keywords. He calls for a deep, long stone pillar to be generated, sending the other hunters flying. Adent can only scream in disbelief, demanding to know what kind of monster he's dealing with. But Loki just gives a smug grin, declaring that the real show is about to begin. He realizes that by adding the keyword deep, he can extend the pillar as far into the ground as he needs. Loki smirks, remembering he has an audience to impress. He declares that he'll be hunting with a bit of flair from now on. With a confident grin, he tells them to watch closely as he shows them the difference in their skill. His basket of materials sits safely atop the massive stone pillar, but now he has to figure out how to get it back down. He visualizes his trajectory, a new plan already forming in his mind. Crouching low to the ground, he prepares to launch himself into the air. He generates a 5-meter stone pillar directly beneath his feet, using it as a makeshift elevator. He grabs the basket in midair, his plan working perfectly. The landing is terrifying, but he can't deny that the experiment was a complete success. He calculates the mana cost, realizing he has to carefully manage his energy to keep this up. But a satisfied smile spreads across his face, knowing this will finally stabilize his hunts on the Rocker Plains. With his sword raised high, he declares it's time to hunt even more. But by the time he gets back to the guild, he's completely exhausted from getting a little too carried away. The cook tells him to just leave his haul, promising to look at it after he's done with the current customer. Loki adds another massive bag to the pile, a testament to his day's work. The cook immediately realizes that Loki is the cause of the recent emergency request. Loki frantically tries to deny it, insisting he has nothing to do with the sudden increase in poison mice. But the cook just smiles, explaining that while it's not his fault, he was certainly the catalyst. Loki can only look down in defeat, unable to argue with the man's logic. The cook confirms the impressive haul, all of it A-rank quality. But Loki is already asking about bigger prey, like orcs, much to the cook's frustration. The man points out that hauling back an entire orc by himself would be impossible. Loki just smiles, confident that he'll find a way to manage it. Another hunter is completely floored, realizing Loki's stamina comes from running his massive hauls back and forth. The cook finally shoos them all away, blaming Loki for making the guild so chaotic. Walking away, Loki decides his next purchase will have to be a custom-made bag. But his thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a new voice. A smug-looking hunter steps out, offering a casual but unwelcome greeting. Flanked by his crew, the man demands that Loki hand over his earnings. Adent screams at him not to walk away, demanding he report his actions to Amanda. But she's already there, asking if it's true they tried to form a party with Loki. Loki stammers, insisting that's not what happened at all. He remembers them simply telling him to do his best, a clear attempt to take credit for his work. Adent's party doubles down, claiming that as a team the rewards should naturally be split. But the reality was far different, with Loki's overwhelming power leaving them completely terrified. He knows he can't be bothered with them, deciding it's just not worth his time. Adent gets in his face, demanding to know his rank and how much he's earned. Amanda calmly reveals that all three of them are F rank, with a combined reward of only 42,000. Adent loses it, demanding Loki be disqualified for speaking out of turn. But Amanda calmly asks why, since they were the ones who claimed Loki was their party member. Adent can only stammer in agreement, caught in his own lie. One of his cronies offers Loki a pittance, telling him a kid doesn't need any more than that. But Loki slaps the hand away without a second thought. He explains that since he's earning 400,000 on his own, there's no reason to party with nuisances. Adent's crew explodes in anger, refusing to listen to a word he says. Loki gives them one final warning. If they continue to bother him, he'll consider them enemies. The other hunter just laughs, saying that being an enemy is no different from being a monster. With his hand on his sword, Loki declares that if they won't listen to reason, he'll cut them down without mercy. Adent can only stare back in disbelief, unable to process the sudden threat. Amanda panics, screaming for someone to get the guildmaster before things get out of hand. Aiden's face twists in a furious snarl as he screams at the cocky brat in front of him, but a stern voice cuts through the chaos as Yargo appears, demanding to know what all the noise is about. Adent immediately turns to plead his case, but Loki stands his ground, refusing to back down. The guildmaster tells them to follow him, explaining this is no place to cause a scene. A new chapter begins with a simple rule. The easiest way to break the rules is to teach those who won't listen that they'll be left to the monsters. A memory of his old life surfaces, a time when he was the one forced to endure the harassment of his superiors. Yargo explains that the guild doesn't intervene in hunter disputes, but if they insist on causing trouble, he'll treat them as the villains. Adent can only scream in frustration, unable to understand why they're siding with a cocky rookie. Yargo clarifies that he's not taking sides, having already heard Loki's version of events. Loki can only feel a sense of relief, grateful that this man is in charge. Adent argues that the guild's job is to prevent situations that could lead to a hunter's death, a line of reasoning that leaves Loki completely baffled. The guildmaster lays out the worst-case scenario. A fight between them would lead to casualties, and Adent's party would be the ones to fall. The hunter scoffs at the idea, refusing to believe a single kid could be such a threat. But Yargo points out their poor risk management is exactly why they're still stuck at F rank. He then brings up the sheer volume of materials Loki brings in, asking Adent if he truly understands who he's provoking. The crushing weight of that truth leaves Adent completely speechless. Loki realizes the guildmaster is finally acknowledging his true strength, even if it's in a roundabout way. Loki calmly explains that he never intended to be hostile toward them. But Yargo lays out their entire scheme, to harass him, steal his materials, and then file a false report. He tells them their actions are a disgrace, and their time as hunters is officially over. The three of them can only stare in horror as he announces their permanent expulsion from the guild. Adent continues to argue, but Loki knows that once the guild's jurisdiction ends, it becomes a legal matter. One of the hunters breaks down completely, realizing he has no idea what to do with his life now. Yargo offers a sliver of mercy, saying he'll find them other work and that they should be grateful they weren't sold into slavery. Amanda comments on how cleanly the situation was resolved, then turns to ask Loki if he's satisfied. But with a cold, unsettling smile, Loki declares that this isn't nearly enough. The sudden shift in his demeanor leaves Adent completely terrified. The guildmaster's expression hardens, questioning Loki's sudden demand. Loki calmly explains that their punishment is a separate issue. What he wants is personal compensation. Adent can only stammer, asking if he's demanding something more than just their expulsion. Loki coldly dismisses their pleas, telling them he doesn't care about their excuses or the risks they failed to consider. He explains that he's no hero, just someone who was trying to live his life until they decided to get in his way. His eyes burn with a cold fury as he recounts how they tried to use him, just like so many others from his past. He declares that in this world, everyone is responsible for their own actions. And since this isn't a game, he's going to make them regret their choices for the rest of their lives. Yargo warns him not to push them too far, but Loki just smiles, finding the situation perfect. He then asks if they plan to take revenge, welcoming the idea so he can finally treat them like the monsters they are. He unleashes his pent-up rage, screaming that he's barely restraining the urge to end them right here. Adent and his cronies can only tremble in fear, completely broken by the boy's terrifying threat. They immediately bow, desperately offering all their money and equipment just to be spared. And with that, the 3 disgraced hunters are escorted out of the guild for good. From his office window, Yargo watches the scene unfold with a thoughtful expression. Loki approaches the guildmaster, who seems to have been waiting for him. He offers up the bag of coins he just received, calling it compensation for all the trouble. The money he extorted from the hunters is poured into Yargo's hand. The guildmaster looks down at the boy, questioning if this ruthless method is his idea of common sense. But Loki simply clenches his fist, explaining he has no sympathy for those who harm others without a second thought. Yargo lets out a small smile, admitting that with Loki's reckless nature, one life would never be enough. He then hands the bag of extorted money to Amanda, telling her to hold on to it for the time being. But Loki asks if she can give the potions from the disgraced hunters to Jink and the others instead. He explains with a smile that it's the least he can do, since he owes them so much. Amanda agrees, noting how much Loki has changed since he first arrived. Later, Yargo discusses Loki's progress, deciding that his caution is a necessary trait for a hunter. His expression remains stern, his mind clearly focused on the boy's future. He turns to Loki, warning him that the nail that sticks out is the one that gets hammered down. But Loki just smiles, replying that while he'll try not to stand out, he has no intention of being hammered down. The guildmaster can only let out a quiet, amused sigh at the boy's unwavering confidence. Yargo turns back with a knowing smile, asking if his pronunciation of an otherworldly language was correct. Loki is completely stunned, realizing the guildmaster just quoted the only Japanese phrase he's used. His mind races, understanding that Yargo intentionally spoke his language to test him. The guildmaster explains that from their very first meeting, his suspicions have been growing, and now he is certain. He looks down at Loki and asks the one question that changes everything. If he is a person from another world... Loki's blood runs cold, his carefully guarded secret finally exposed. He frantically tries to explain himself, insisting he has no hostile intentions. But his mind immediately jumps to a darker conclusion, wondering what the guildmaster plans to do with him. So with a manic grin, he asks what a 1 million beak reward would get him. Yargo just laughs, telling the boy to consider it a sweet threat to ensure his cooperation. Yargo asks if Loki is willing to accept his offer of cooperation. Loki agrees with a nervous smile, saying he'll take the next day off. The guildmaster tells him to return tomorrow at noon, promising it will be helpful. Loki can only look up at the guild, a sense of anticipation in the air. But as he walks away, he admits he's terrible at dealing with people like Yargo. Just then, a mysterious voice suddenly calls out his name. He looks around, confused, as the voice identifies herself as Regal, the goddess of war. She asks if he's been using the communication skill, telling him to call when he's ready to talk. But Loki just ignores her, the goddess's voice fading away. He grits his teeth, cursing the goddesses for their completely useless skill. He decides that since he has questions, he might as well give the skill another try. He reminds himself to be careful, knowing he can't afford another interrogation like the one with Yargo. Back in his room, he prepares to use the skill again, noticing it's already reached level 2. A cheerful voice suddenly calls out his name, asking if he can hear her. She introduces herself as Farron, the goddess of harvest, thrilled that she can finally talk to him properly. But Loki's excitement immediately fades, a sense of dread washing over him. Another voice cuts in, introducing herself as Riste, the goddess of commerce, and questioning his motives. She explains that even just reading his thoughts is a difficult task for them. He lets out a sigh of relief, grateful that at least one of them seems calm and collected. He imagines a cool, intelligent goddess, a welcome change from the chaos he's experienced so far. But the chaotic chorus of divine voices is already giving him a headache. He tries to steer the conversation, explaining he has a very specific question for them. He recounts how he met the conditions for magic long ago, but could never cast a single spell until after their meeting. He clarifies that his magic only started working the day after he visited the church and met them. One of the goddesses excitedly suggests that their meeting must have been the trigger. She explains that in this world, spirits act as intermediaries for magic, feeding on a user's mana. But since the spirits couldn't recognize Loki's existence, they never responded to his attempts to cast spells. Loki realizes that since the spirits are dependents of the gods, his encounter with them must have registered him in the system. He understands that if he'd never met them, he would have been powerless forever, all thanks to that acorn-headed god. But his train of thought is constantly derailed by the goddess's endless chatter in his mind. He tries to explain his frustration, but the constant divine chatter is just too much to handle. But with his questions finally answered, he offers a genuine thank you, feeling a massive weight lifted from his shoulders. The cook's words echo in his mind, a reminder that even if he hunts stronger monsters, he's still limited. He realizes the biggest obstacle to his progress is the sheer weight of the materials he collects. So he decides to ask the goddesses if there's a specific skill that could solve his problem. He imagines a classic RPG inventory, a separate space where he can store all his loot. But the goddess reveals that space magic is a skill they grant to other summoned heroes for that exact purpose. Before he can even process the bombshell, the divine communication abruptly ends, leaving him screaming in frustration. He knows his skill points are precious, but a new path has just opened up before him. The information from the goddesses is a game changer, and he knows his next stop has to be the guild. He feels a surge of excitement, realizing the real story is finally beginning. But just as the thought crosses his mind, his consciousness begins to fade, and in an instant he completely blacks out. He wakes with a start, shocked to find it's already morning. He tries to recall the events of last night, remembering the divine communication before he suddenly passed out. He wonders if he was poisoned on the plains, noticing his mana hasn't fully recovered. A sudden jolt of realization runs through him. His eyes fall upon the sword resting at the foot of his bed. He stares for a moment, before it all starts to click into place. He remembers his new routine, draining his mana every night to grind his magic skills, a task that required 60 points after his talk with the goddesses. He checks his status, realizing the sword's mana boost was barely enough for his training. He was using the blade to supplement his own power, wondering what would have happened if he'd let go. The conclusion is simple. He passed out from complete mana depletion. In any other fantasy world, passing out in the wild like that would have been a death sentence. The horrifying realization hits him. He could have actually died from his reckless grinding. But he quickly shakes off the fear, determined to make the most of the new day. His first stop is the guild, where he plans to collect his earnings before his meeting with Yargo. But a familiar voice from a nearby table catches his attention. He overhears other hunters gossiping about how he drove Aiden's party out of the guild. Loki just sighs, completely unsurprised that he's already the talk of the town. He remembers his old gaming days, how anyone who stood out was immediately targeted by jealous players. The atmosphere became so toxic that even other players quit, unable to stand the pressure. But he refuses to let the malice of others dictate his actions after investing so much time and effort. He recalls that as long as the guild system worked, he didn't care what other players thought or did. He's always believed that dealing with random, anonymous people is a complete waste of his time. That's why he prefers to work alone, but a sudden pain in his head snaps him back to the present. He looks up to see Jink and Mesa running toward him, calling out his name. Loki can only stare back, completely caught off guard by their sudden appearance. It seems Mesa's mother ran into Amanda the night before and was told where to find him. Jink holds up the potions Loki gave them, offering a cheerful thank you for the gift. Jink explains he's glad he caught Loki before he headed out for the day. The other two ask if he can help them with the delivery since he's heading in the same direction. Loki agrees without hesitation, his thoughts still on his upcoming meeting. But his first stop is the church, where he has some unfinished business with the goddesses. He greets the familiar nun, who seems pleased by his devoutness. He offers a small gift as an apology for the trouble he caused during his last visit. With the pleasantries out of the way, he kneels down to pray, hoping to get a clearer answer this time. A familiar voice echoes in his mind, confirming that his call has been heard. He listens intently, bracing himself for the divine chaos he knows is coming. And just as expected, the goddesses are already there, one of them telling the other to calm down. A new voice confirms this is their first time meeting face to face. And suddenly, he's surrounded by 3 more goddesses who introduce themselves as Farron, Phil, and Riste. The sheer visual overload is almost too much for Loki to handle. He realizes the other 3 are here as well, meaning all 6 goddesses have appeared before him. There's Farron, the goddess of harvest, with a smile so bright it's almost blinding. Phil, the goddess of life, whose gentle expression radiates pure compassion. And Riste, the goddess of commerce, with a mysterious and intelligent gaze. Loki can only cover his face, completely overwhelmed by the divine presence. The sheer pressure of it all is more than he was prepared for. But one of the goddesses reminds him he can't just leave, holding him in place with her power. Farron, the goddess of harvest, eagerly pushes him into a chair. He's stunned to find a table has materialized out of thin air. She offers him a cup of tea, insisting he make himself comfortable. Loki can only stare, completely bewildered by this sudden hospitality. He finds himself in a strange space, surrounded by goddesses who note how well he handled the other 2. The first 3 goddesses explain they were on guard, but now that they've heard his story, they can finally relax. Farron gets close, explaining that since he's no threat, she just wants to be friends. But her intense gaze leaves Loki completely flustered and confused. She pulls back, confirming that even her mind's eye can't read his soul directly. Loki asks if this means he's currently in a soul state, a fact she cheerfully confirms. She explains that since they can't interact with his physical body, they've simply pulled his soul here instead. Loki panics, realizing this means his body is completely defenseless back in the church. But another goddess reassures him, explaining she's used time magic to slow the world outside to a crawl. He asks if this incredible power is a skill, a question she happily confirms. The realization hits him. He might be able to learn cheat-like abilities directly from the goddesses. She tells him that while not everything is possible, the potential is certainly there. Loki takes a sip of his tea, his mind racing with the possibilities. The goddess leans in, explaining that they're just as curious about him as he is about them. She gets closer, telling him they share the same desire for knowledge, and with a warm smile, she encourages him to ask about anything that's on his mind. He's completely flustered, his mind struggling to process the situation. He tries to play it cool, but the divine hospitality is just too much. He leans in to ask about the skills he's been dreaming of. She explains that some skills are naturally acquired through life experience. But Loki realizes there must be another category of abilities. He asks about the special skills that are granted, not earned. The goddess confirms these are unique abilities tied to one's very soul. The thought of unique, soul-bound powers fills him with pure excitement. The goddesses mention that these powers are the work of a higher being named Felza. The name rings a bell, and Loki immediately asks who this Felza is. Loki questions if it's really okay for them to be so trusting. He remembers his first impression of Rhea, who seemed to think this world was already a lost cause. But Farron just laughs, finding his blunt honesty amusing. He immediately regrets saying too much, now that the initial misunderstanding is over. But his past experiences have taught him that trusting the management rarely ends well. The goddesses explain that whatever Felza's intentions are, their role is simply to guide this world without interfering directly. Loki realizes he's probably overstepped, wondering what they must think of him. But Phil, the goddess of life, just watches him with a gentle gaze. She offers a warm smile, telling him he's a kind person for worrying about their feelings. The unexpected compliment leaves Loki completely flustered. He complains that he's still not used to them reading his mind. Farron cheerfully explains that before they answer his questions, there's something they want to ask him. Loki looks back, nervously asking what they could possibly want to know. She asks if he's familiar with a world known as Earth. Loki is stunned, admitting that's the world he originally came from. Another goddess seems to understand, but Loki asks what that has to do with anything. Farron explains that Earth is one of the many worlds managed by Felza, and it's considered their greatest success. Loki is confused by her jealousy, but she tells him the real discussion is about to begin. She explains that because this world relied so heavily on magic and skills, its civilization has stagnated and is slowly dying out. And to prevent that, they summon souls from Earth, hoping their advanced knowledge can save this world from its fate. She asks if he knows of the hero Takuya, another soul summoned from Earth. Loki finally understands the reason for all the strange inconsistencies he's seen. People from Earth were brought here to jumpstart this world's development. But if that's the case, then what is his purpose here? While other summoned people work to save this world, he's only ever fought for himself. He asks them to just tell him what he's supposed to do. One of the goddesses simply looks back, calling out his name. He's caught between two worlds, unsure of how he's meant to live his new life. His only real world was the one he found inside a game. A memory of being cast out by his family, forced into a reality he couldn't handle. He remembers a world where he had no honor, no accolades, nothing to his name. A life spent as a shut-in, with no real-world knowledge or experience to offer. He can only wonder what that acorn-headed god could have possibly wanted from someone like him. A gentle voice cuts through his memories, pulling him back to the present. Loki looks down, admitting that he might not be of any use to them. But the goddess gently takes his hands, telling him there's no need to think that way. She explains that others are already contributing their knowledge, so he is free to simply enjoy his new life. The others agree, adding that if he finds something he can do to help, they would be grateful. One of them teases that it's a bit much to ask for a favor after putting him through so much. Loki looks up, contemplating what he could possibly do for them. The goddess of commerce tells him that just by being from Earth, his life has value and she'll be there to help him. The goddesses offer a final, cheerful smile. But Loki can't help but feel she's being a little too proactive, wondering what she's really after. Still, he keeps his suspicions to himself for now. With a final wave, he thanks them for their time, feeling a massive weight lifted from his shoulders. He admits he might not be able to do anything grand, but he's willing to help in any way he can. He remembers his old life, where rushing only ever made things worse. So he takes a deep breath, deciding to take things slow and steady from now on. With a new sense of purpose, he focuses on the first step right in front of him. He arrives at the guild, announcing he's here for his meeting with the guild master. The other hunters are already gossiping, wondering why the guild master would give a personal request to a rookie. Loki just sighs, admitting he expected this kind of attention but hates it all the same. Yargo appears behind him, explaining that the rumors will eventually die down. He adds that there will always be those who try to interfere, a sentiment Loki seems to understand all too well. The guildmaster then tells Loki to follow him, and our boy eagerly asks if he can see the back rooms. Yargo confirms, much to Loki's delight, who's always wanted to see behind the scenes. But the room is a chaotic mess of paperwork, with Amanda buried in stacks of documents. Yargo explains this is all part of the request, asking Amanda to light the way forward. Loki can only look on, his curiosity now fully piqued. Amanda stands at the top of a dark staircase, explaining that from this point on, everything is a secret. Yargo gestures toward the darkness, leading Loki into the guild's most restricted area. And Loki's gamer brain immediately kicks into overdrive, certain this is the start of a secret event. As they descend, the guildmaster explains that what he's about to show him was found 6 years ago in the Palmyra forest. He adds that the items are so sensitive, he's been keeping them under lock and key himself. Loki peeks around the corner, his anticipation growing with every step. Yargo opens a case to reveal a sneaker, a cracked smartphone, and a watch, asking if Loki recognizes any of them. Loki's expression confirms that he absolutely does. His mind races. These are all items that should only exist back on Earth. Yargo asks if he can explain what they are, offering to let him examine them more closely. But Loki hesitates, unsure how to even begin explaining his entire world to them. He turns to Amanda, realizing she must have known he was from another world all along. But she admits she was only told this morning, explaining the items are treated as top-secret artifacts. Yargo reassures him that while the government knows about the items, he has no intention of reporting Loki's existence. Loki understands the gravity of the situation and agrees to explain what he can, starting with the first item. But he starts by playing dumb, claiming he has no idea what the strange glass plate could be. Yargo presses him, asking if he's truly certain he doesn't recognize it. Loki stammers, explaining that the words to describe such a thing don't even exist in this world. He tries his best to explain the concept, a task as vast as describing the universe itself. The explanation is so complex that it nearly melts the guildmaster's brain. Yargo concludes that reproducing such technology is impossible, and Loki agrees it's better to just give up for now. He explains that even if he knew how it worked, this world's fundamentals are just too different. Yargo can only wonder what kind of advanced civilization Loki must have come from. Loki describes a world without magic, where science and experimentation explain the universe's mysteries. The sheer scale of that concept leaves both Yargo and Amanda completely speechless. But Loki's expression suddenly brightens as he moves on to the next item. He explains that while the phone is impossible, the watch is a different story. He points out that this world already has clocks, even if they're large and owned by nobles. He clarifies that the original versions were spring-wound, just like the ones from his world. Yargo asks about smaller versions, and Loki confirms that pocket watches do exist for royalty. With a confident smile, Loki explains that this is just a small clock attached to a leather strap. He moves on to the sneaker, excitedly explaining it's a type of shoe specialized for running. With a manic grin, he insists that by replicating its dimensions, they could create a far more comfortable shoe. Yargo simply thanks him for the valuable insight, a quiet understanding passing between them. Loki hands the box back, admitting he got a little carried away despite his lack of expertise. As Amanda notes how light the shoe is, Loki realizes the Guildmaster has been unusually expressive today. He understands now that Yargo's goal isn't just to develop this world, as the goddesses had suggested, and he's left to wonder what he could possibly do to help. Amanda seems to ask a question, her expression unreadable. So Loki offers to show them some of the tools he brought from his own world. He leads them back to his inn, explaining that since he's the only guest, it should be perfectly safe. Yargo asks where Amanda is, and Loki explains she's out running errands for the day. He agrees to give the Guildmaster a quick look at his things before she gets back. And so, he lays out his small collection of modern tools from his old world. Yargo is stunned to see a calculator that still works, calling it another national treasure. He recalls the other relics, explaining he was put in charge of them due to his extensive knowledge. Loki can't help but notice the Guildmaster seems unusually excited by all of this. He watches the man's reaction with a thoughtful, curious expression. With a proud grin, he presents his final item, a fully functional flashlight. Yargo wonders if it's some kind of light magic, but Loki explains it's just a simple battery-powered LED. The Guildmaster is completely mesmerized by the sheer intensity of the light, asking how it's even possible. Loki tries to calm him down, but the Guildmaster is clearly overwhelmed by the possibilities. Just then, Amanda returns from her errands with a cheerful smile. But her good mood is shattered when the flashlight beam hits her square in the face. After the chaos dies down, Loki tries to get the conversation back on track. He explains that while some items are impossible to reproduce, he has other ideas. Yargo listens intently, agreeing with the boy's assessment. And that's why he wanted to show him one more thing from his world. He presents a simple piece of paper, a technology that could be replicated here. Yargo realizes that mass-producing paper could revolutionize their entire society. But the biggest hurdle, as Loki points out, is figuring out how to actually make it. With a confident smile, Loki assures them he can do it, having made something similar when he was 7. He recalls a simple elementary school project, melting down milk cartons to make a new material. He explains the basic process, certain that with the right ingredients he can replicate it. Yargo and Amanda are captivated, realizing that paper could revolutionize information and change their entire world. The Guildmaster immediately asks Loki to teach them everything he knows, and our boy readily agrees. Loki insists he doesn't need a reward, but asks if he can show the Guildmaster something in return. The old man is like a kid with new toys, completely fascinated by Loki's modern gear. Yargo admits that while he doesn't fully understand, he can't help but be intrigued by the boy. His thoughts then turn to another otherworldly visitor, asking Loki what he knows of the hero Takuya. The name immediately clicks, and Loki realizes this legendary hero must have come from Earth, just like him. Yargo then asks if Loki would be interested in learning about the other people from his world.